Yvonne Bates sat alone in her car outside the glowing Bates mansion, still wearing the navy dress Quentin once said made her look wife material. Inside laughter spilled through the windows. Her suitcase sat by the front door like garbage waiting for pickup. Then her phone buzzed. Brianna's Instagram story appeared on the screen. Finally getting rid of her, Yvonne stared at the caption until her hands stopped shaking. Then she screenshotted it and sent it to Brianna's husband, Ethan. "Did you know your wife has been planning this with my husband?" His reply came in seconds. "Yvonne, call me. There's something you need to know. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, would you have confronted them or sent the screenshot too?" The first thing Yvonne Bates noticed was that nobody came outside looking for her. Not Quentin, not his mother, not even Brianna, who usually performed kindness like it was an Olympic sport whenever other people were watching. The mansion glowed against the cold Illinois night, every window warm with golden light. Laughter drifted through the glass in soft bursts, followed by the clink of crystal and silverware. It sounded like a commercial for expensive happiness, and Yvonne was sitting alone in the driveway with her suitcase by the front door. Like a woman already erased, her phone screen dimmed in her trembling hand. Ethan's message still stared back at her. "There's something you need to know." Yvonne swallowed hard and hit call before she could lose her nerve. He answered immediately. "Yvonne." The way he said her name made her stomach tighten, carefully, cautiously, like he was standing near something explosive. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. "Why would Brianna post something like that?" Silence. Then Ethan exhaled heavily. "Because she thinks she already won." Yvonne stared through the windshield at the massive stone house Quentin had once promised would become their forever home. The same house she had decorated for Christmas every year. The same house where she'd spent 12 hours cooking Thanksgiving dinner while Brianna filmed aesthetic wine glass videos for Instagram. The same house where Quentin once kissed her forehead and said, "You make this place feel like home." Now her suitcase sat outside like a warning. One what Yvonne whispered. Another pause. "Your marriage." The words hit harder than she expected, not because they shocked her completely. Somewhere deep down, under years of excuses and emotional bruises, she'd already known something was dying between her and Quentin. But hearing someone else say it out loud made it real. Inside the mansion, shadows moved behind the dining room curtains. Someone raised a champagne glass. Yvonne wondered if Quentin was laughing too. "He wouldn't do this," she said automatically, even though her voice sounded weak to her own ears. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "You still protect him." Yvonne closed her eyes. Maybe she did. Maybe she had spent years protecting Quentin from consequences he deserved to face himself. Quentin Bates was the kind of man people admired instantly. Tall, polished, intelligent, without trying too hard. At 38, he had everything upper-class suburban America worshipped: executive title, expensive suits, a luxury SUV, and the ability to make everyone in a room feel important. When Yvonne met him, he used to bring her coffee during her 12-hour hospital shifts. Back then, she thought kindness lived inside him naturally. She didn't notice how conditional it was. At first, Quentin only corrected little things. "You're overthinking. You misunderstood. You're too emotional." Eventually, Yvonne stopped trusting her own instincts altogether. "Ethan," she said carefully, "tell me the truth." He hesitated long enough to terrify her. "Brianna's been talking about this for weeks." Yvonne's chest tightened. She kept saying Quentin was finally taking his life back, that he deserved someone more aligned with his future. More aligned? The phrase sounded corporate, cold, sanitized, like replacing an employee instead of destroying a wife. Yvonne looked down at her hands. The diamond ring Quentin gave her 5 years ago suddenly felt unbearably heavy. "She said I wasn't aligned," Yvonne asked softly. Ethan sighed again. "She called you a charity wife once." That one almost physically hurt. Yvonne felt the air leave her lungs. A charity wife. Not a partner. Not a woman Quentin loved. Just someone he settled for out of pity. I told her she was being cruel, Ethan added quickly. I'm serious, Yvonne. I fought with her about this. But Yvonne barely heard him anymore, because suddenly old memories were rearranging themselves in her head. Brianna asking Yvonne if she was still doing little hospital paperwork stuff. Preston Bates once joking that Quentin was carrying the financial side of the marriage. Eleanor smiling tightly whenever someone asked whether Yvonne planned to return to work. All those moments Yvonne convinced herself not to take personally. Now they connected like shattered glass, forming a single ugly picture. She's lying, Yvonne whispered, though she no longer believed it fully. I wish she was. Yvonne leaned her head back against the seat. 3 years ago, Quentin begged her to leave Northlake Medical Network after his promotion. He said his travel schedule was becoming impossible. He said they needed one stable person managing home life. You're better at creating peace than I am, he told her. At the time, it sounded loving. Now it sounded strategic. Why tonight? Yvonne asked. Ethan's voice lowered. Because Quentin's promotion package goes into effect next month. Yvonne frowned. What does that mean? It means if you divorce after the equity vests, you may legally be entitled to more. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Suddenly, the timing made horrifying sense. The coldness? The rushed humiliation? The papers Quentin had vaguely mentioned last week when they argued? Yvonne remembered asking him if something was wrong between them. He'd smiled while checking emails and said, "You always create problems right before important moments in my career." Her eyes burned, not from tears anymore, from humiliation. They planned this, she asked. I don't know how much Quentin planned, Ethan admitted, but Brianna's absolutely involved. I saw messages between them. What kind of messages? She deleted most of them before I could look closely. Yvonne's stomach sank deeper, but I saw enough, Ethan continued. Enough to know they were talking about getting you out fast. Quietly. Like she was a legal inconvenience. Not a human being. A burst of laughter echoed from inside the house. Yvonne looked up instinctively and froze. Through the large dining room windows, she finally saw her. Vanessa Monroe. Perfect blonde waves. Champagne-colored dress. One manicured hand resting lightly on Quentin's arm while she laughed at something Brianna said. Too comfortable, too familiar, too welcome. Yvonne remembered Quentin rolling his eyes months ago when she asked if Vanessa flirted with him. She's just ambitious, he'd said. Not every attractive woman wants your husband. But Vanessa was sitting in Yvonne's place tonight, inside Yvonne's marriage. She's there, Yvonne whispered. Ethan went silent. You knew. Another pause. Yes. The betrayal cracked wider. Yvonne watched Quentin lean down toward Vanessa to say something near her ear. Vanessa smiled slowly. Brianna lifted her wine glass toward them both, like they were already celebrating the next chapter. Something inside Yvonne finally stopped begging to be loved correctly. The pain was still there, sharp, humiliating, but underneath it, something colder was beginning to form. Clarity. You know what the worst part is, Yvonne said softly. What I would have fought for him. Her voice broke then finally. I would have stayed through anything if he'd just been honest with me. Ethan sounded genuinely devastated for her. I know. Yvonne wiped her tears angrily. No, not tonight. They wanted a breakdown. They wanted screaming. They wanted proof she was unstable and emotional and difficult. Instead, she stared at the glowing mansion one last time. Then she opened the car door. Yvonne, Ethan said sharply, What are you doing? She stepped out into the freezing night air. I'm done sitting outside my own life. And before fear could stop her, Yvonne Bates walked toward the front door of the mansion. The moment Yvonne opened the front door, the laughter died. Not slowly, instantly. Like someone had cut the sound out of the room with a knife, warm light spilled across the marble foyer, illuminating polished floors, expensive artwork, and the people who had spent the last hour pretending she no longer existed. Quentin stood near the dining table with a crystal whiskey glass in his hand. Vanessa Monroe stood beside him. Too close. Brianna sat at the head of the table, scrolling through her phone, probably deleting the Instagram story by now. Eleanor Bates froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Preston Bates looked irritated, more than surprised, like Yvonne had interrupted an important business meeting instead of walking into her own humiliation. Nobody spoke first. Yvonne could hear the ticking of the giant gold wall clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Then Brianna smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the kind people wore right before they delivered cruelty disguised as sophistication. Well, she said lightly, this is awkward. Yvonne looked directly at her. No, she answered quietly. What's awkward is posting about me while I'm sitting outside. The room shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa lowered her eyes. Quentin immediately stepped forward. Yvonne, he said sharply, can we not do this right now? Do this. Like she was the problem entering the room, not the room itself. Yvonne stared at him for a second too long. He looked immaculate as always. Dark tailored suit, expensive watch, calm executive posture, a man completely in control. And somehow that hurt more than if he'd looked guilty. You told me this dinner was family only, Yvonne said. Her voice remained calm, but inside her chest something was cracking open wider with every word. Quentin glanced briefly toward Vanessa before answering. It is. The sentence landed like a slap. Brianna actually snorted into her wine. Oh my God, she muttered. Quentin. But she was smiling while she said it. Yvonne looked around the table slowly. There were 8 place settings. 8. And not one of them had her name card. Vanessa was sitting where Yvonne usually sat during holidays. Near Quentin, near Eleanor, near the center of the family. The realization hollowed her out. This wasn't spontaneous. This had already been rehearsed emotionally long before tonight. Yvonne Eleanor said carefully, using the same gentle tone people used with unstable strangers, I think emotions are running high. Yvonne turned toward her mother-in-law. I'm emotional because my suitcase is outside. Eleanor's lips tightened. Preston leaned back in his chair with visible annoyance. Dragging this into a scene won't help anybody. There it was again. The implication that Yvonne's pain was inconvenient, messy, embarrassing. Quentin finally moved closer to her and lowered his voice. Can we talk privately? No, Yvonne replied immediately. His jaw flexed slightly. That tiny reaction would have terrified her once. Tonight, it only confirmed something ugly. He expected obedience automatically. Brianna crossed one elegant leg over the other. You know, she said casually, if you just handled things with maturity, none of this would have become dramatic. Yvonne slowly looked at her. Maturity, she repeated. Yes. Brianna shrugged. Adults grow apart. It happens. You posted about throwing me away? Oh, please. Brianna rolled her eyes. It was a joke. A joke to who? To literally everyone except you. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Good. Let her be uncomfortable. Yvonne walked farther into the dining room, each step slow and deliberate. The smell of rosemary steak and expensive candles filled the air. A dinner she probably helped pay for. A dinner celebrating the man replacing her. You all sat here, Yvonne said softly, while my suitcase waited outside. Nobody answered. Because there was no defense for that. Quentin rubbed a hand across his face. You're making this uglier than it needs to be. Yvonne almost laughed. Ugly. That word again. As if ugliness had begun with her reaction instead of their behavior. Her eyes drifted toward Vanessa. You knew he was married? Vanessa swallowed visibly. Quentin told me things were complicated. Complicated. Another sanitized word. Yvonne nodded slowly. I'm sure he did. Quentin's tone hardened immediately. Don't involve Vanessa. Yvonne stared at him in disbelief. Not involve her? She whispered. She's sitting in my seat. That finally silenced him. Brianna jumped in quickly, clearly uncomfortable, with how exposed things suddenly felt. "Oh my God, it's a chair, Yvonne." "No," Yvonne said, her voice trembling for the first time. "It's my life." The room fell quiet again. Even Preston looked away. For a split second, Yvonne hated herself for sounding emotional, because Quentin had trained her to hate it. Every tear became proof she was irrational. Every hurt feeling became evidence she was unstable. Meanwhile, his coldness passed for strength. Quentin stepped closer again. "Can you stop this?" he muttered under his breath. "You're embarrassing yourself." The words sliced deeper than she expected. Not us, not this situation. Herself. Yvonne stared at the man she married and suddenly saw something horrifyingly clear. Quentin never protected her. He protected his image from her emotions. The difference changed everything. "What exactly was your plan tonight?" Yvonne asked quietly. "Humiliate me until I signed something." His expression shifted. Tiny, fast, but enough. And Yvonne noticed. Brianna noticed too. "Quentin," she warned softly. Too late. Yvonne's pulse started pounding. "There are papers," she asked. Quentin straightened immediately. "We'll discuss that privately." "So there are papers?" Yvonne. "How long have you been planning this?" Vanessa stood abruptly. "I should go." "No," Brianna said quickly. "Sit down." But Vanessa already looked panicked. Because suddenly this wasn't elegant executive drama anymore. It was cruelty in bright lighting. Yvonne's eyes wandered across the room, across the polished kitchen island, across half-empty wine glasses, across the enormous floral centerpiece. She probably would have arranged herself if they'd allowed her inside earlier. And then she saw it. Quentin's laptop. Open. Glowing softly beside the kitchen counter. Her breathing slowed. On the screen sat a folder. Bold white letters against dark blue. Separation strategy. The room blurred slightly around the edges. This wasn't fear anymore. It was confirmation. They had planned her destruction carefully enough to organize it into a folder. Yvonne looked back at Quentin. How long, she repeated. He remained silent. That silence told her everything. Brianna stood abruptly, now irritation replacing fake politeness. "You know what," she snapped. "Fine. You want honesty?" Quentin outgrew this marriage years ago. Quentin looked at her sharply. "Brianna." "No, I'm serious." She laughed bitterly. Everybody keeps tiptoeing around her feelings, and it's exhausting. Yvonne felt heat crawl into her face. Brianna kept going. "You stopped matching his life a long time ago. Quentin's building something huge, and you're still clinging to this sad little dependent wife identity." Dependent wife. The irony almost made Yvonne dizzy. She had sacrificed her career for Quentin, moved cities for Quentin, managed his home, his family, his social calendar, his emotional disasters, and somehow he became self-made while she became dependent. "That's enough." Ethan's voice suddenly barked from Brianna's phone speaker. Everyone froze. Brianna had forgotten she was still connected to Ethan through Bluetooth audio. Her face drained instantly. Ethan sounded furious. "You posted that story while she was outside? Are you out of your mind, Ethan? Stay out of this." "No, you stay out of her marriage." The silence afterward was brutal. And for the first time all night, Yvonne realized something important. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't oversensitive. This really was cruel. Quentin moved quickly toward the kitchen island, toward the laptop, toward whatever he didn't want her seeing. But he was 1 second too late, because Yvonne had already read the title, Separation Strategy. And suddenly, she understood. This dinner was never meant to celebrate Quentin's promotion. It was meant to bury her quietly beneath it. For 1 suspended second, nobody moved. Yvonne stood in the middle of the Bates family dining room, with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her wrists. The laptop screen glowed behind Quentin's shoulder, casting a cold blue light across the marble kitchen island. Separation strategy. 2 words. Clean, corporate, organized. As if ending a marriage were no different from planning a quarterly budget review. Quentin closed the laptop with a sharp snap. The sound cracked through the room. Yvonne flinched, then hated herself for it. Brianna's face had gone pale, but she recovered quickly, smoothing her hair, like a woman resetting herself for the next performance. Eleanor took another careful sip of wine, though her fingers trembled against the stem. Preston's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, not with guilt, but calculation. Vanessa Monroe stood near her chair, frozen between leaving and staying, her champagne dress shimmering under the chandelier, like she had accidentally wandered into the wrong scene of a movie. But she had not wandered anywhere. She had been invited. Yvonne had been excluded. That difference sat in the room like a body. "What's in the folder?" Yvonne asked. Quentin stepped away from the counter and forced a low, controlled smile. "Nothing you need to spiral over." There it was. The language of dismissal. Not nothing. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Let me explain." Nothing you need to spiral over. Yvonne almost felt Quentin trying to push her back into the role he had built for her, the emotional wife, the unstable wife, the woman whose pain could be used as evidence against her. But something had changed. Her pain was still there, but it was no longer alone. Now it had eyes. Now it was watching. "Open it," she said. Quentin's expression hardened. "No." Brianna let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, come on, Yvonne. You don't get to barge in here and demand access to Quentin's private computer." Yvonne turned toward her slowly. "I didn't barge in. I came into my husband's family home after your post announced you were getting rid of me." Brianna's lips parted, then closed. For the first time, she had no clean comeback. Ethan's voice burst again from the forgotten Bluetooth speaker on Brianna's phone. Brianna shut up. She lunged for the phone and disconnected the call. The sudden silence afterward made the room feel even uglier. Yvonne looked back at Quentin. Was that folder for tonight? His eyes flicked toward Preston. A tiny movement, barely anything, but Yvonne saw it. Preston had always been the quiet power in the Bates family. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His disapproval sat heavy enough to bend everyone around him. Quentin had spent years chasing that approval, like a starving boy chasing warmth. Now Yvonne wondered how much of this had been Quentin's cruelty and how much had been Preston's design. Preston stood and buttoned his jacket. "Yvonne," he said, voice smooth as polished stone. "This is an unfortunate private matter, and you're turning it into spectacle." Yvonne stared at him. "No? Your daughter turned it into spectacle when she posted it online?" Preston's eyes sharpened. That was poor judgment. It was cruelty. Eleanor set her glass down. "Yvonne, sweetheart." "Don't call me sweetheart tonight." The words came out before Yvonne could soften them. Eleanor recoiled as if slapped, but Yvonne did not apologize. She was tired of apologizing for having edges. Eleanor's mouth tightened into a thin line. "We have tried to welcome you into this family." Yvonne laughed once, softly in disbelief. The sound surprised even her. "Welcome me?" she repeated. "You asked me to serve dessert at my own anniversary dinner because the caterer was late." Eleanor looked away. "You told guests I was still figuring out what to do with my life? After Quentin asked me to leave my job?" Quentin's eyes flashed. "I didn't ask you to leave. We decided as a couple." Yvonne turned to him. "No, Quentin. You suggested it for 6 months until I believed refusing meant I didn't support you." His nostrils flared. "You're rewriting history." "No," she said. "I'm finally reading it correctly." Vanessa shifted, grabbing her small clutch. "I really should go." This time Quentin looked at her with panic. "Vanessa, wait." Yvonne watched that panic land. Not for his wife, for his mistress. For the woman whose presence tonight had exposed the lie too clearly. Something in Yvonne's chest folded inward, but she refused to bend with it. Vanessa gave Quentin a strained look. "I didn't know it was going to be like this." Yvonne's eyes moved to her. "What did you think it would be like?" Vanessa swallowed. "I was told you two were separated." Yvonne smiled faintly, and it felt like glass cutting her own mouth. Interesting. I was told this was a family dinner. Vanessa looked away first. Quentin stepped between them. That's enough. The old Yvonne might have stopped there. The old Yvonne would have heard that tone and retreated not because she was weak, but because she had mistaken peacekeeping for love. But tonight, with her suitcase outside and a divorce strategy folder closed before her eyes, peacekeeping felt like helping them bury her. No, she said. It isn't. Brianna crossed her arms. You want the truth so badly? Fine. Quentin's been miserable, Brianna Quentin warned. But Brianna was too angry to stop. He has been carrying this marriage emotionally, socially, financially. Yvonne's head snapped toward her. Financially, Brianna lifted her chin. Yes, financially. Yvonne felt a strange calm settle over her. I paid off Quentin's private loan in 2020. The room went still. Quentin's face changed. Yvonne continued, her voice soft but steady. I used money from my consulting savings when Halden and Pierce delayed his signing bonus. I covered our mortgage for 7 months when he moved apartments and didn't want your father to know his compensation package had changed. Preston turned sharply toward Quentin. Quentin's jaw locked. Yvonne looked at Brianna. I paid for Eleanor's home nurse after her surgery because Quentin said asking insurance questions would stress the family out. Eleanor's eyes widened. Preston's stare darkened. Brianna faltered. Yvonne almost wanted to laugh again. They had spent years calling her dependent because Quentin had hidden every way she held him up. You don't know anything about what I carried, Yvonne said. Quentin's voice dropped dangerously. Stop. Yvonne met his eyes. No. It was one small word, but saying it felt like kicking open a locked door inside herself. Quentin walked toward her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Listen to me. You're upset. If you keep humiliating me in front of everyone, I can't protect you from what happens next. There it was. The threat wearing a husband's face. Yvonne looked at him carefully. Protect me. He leaned closer. Yes. Protect you. Because once lawyers get involved, this becomes unpleasant. A cold shiver ran through her. You already involved lawyers. He did not deny it. Brianna looked smug again, sensing control returning. Yvonne, just be smart for once. Sign whatever Quentin gives you. Walk away with dignity. Yvonne turned slightly. And what do I get in exchange for my dignity? Brianna's smile thinned. A fresh start. No, Yvonne said. You mean silence. The chandelier hummed faintly above them. Preston stepped forward. You are not entitled to everything Quentin has built. Yvonne looked him dead in the eye. I don't want everything Quentin built. I want everyone to stop pretending he built it alone. For the first time that night, Preston had no immediate answer. Yvonne walked toward the foyer, where her suitcase waited beside the front door. Nobody tried to stop her at first. Then Quentin followed. Yvonne? She kept walking. Yvonne, wait. She reached the suitcase handle and wrapped her fingers around it. The leather was cold. Such a small object to hold the collapse of 5 years. Quentin stopped behind her. I have papers, he said quietly. There it was. The confirmation. Yvonne did not turn around. Of course you do. They're generous. She almost laughed. Generous? If you cooperate, we can keep this respectful. She finally faced him. His eyes were serious, almost pleading. But not because he loved her, because she had wandered off script. Respectful would have been telling me the truth before your sister posted my humiliation for laughs. His mouth tightened. That post was wrong. And the suitcase, silence, and Vanessa. More silence, and the folder. His eyes darkened. You don't understand what's at stake. Yvonne stared at him, and for the first time she saw the fear beneath his arrogance. Not fear of losing her, fear of exposure. What's at stake, she said, is your promotion package? His expression flickered. There. The answer. Yvonne's hand tightened around the suitcase handle. Ethan had been right. This was about money, timing, control, and reputation. Quentin reached inside his suit jacket and removed a thick, cream-colored envelope. He held it out to her. Take the night. Read it. Sign it tomorrow. Yvonne looked at the envelope but did not touch it. Why tomorrow? Because dragging this out helps no one. No, she said quietly. Dragging this out helps me. His eyes narrowed. You don't want to fight with my family. Yvonne looked past him at Brianna Eleanor Preston and Vanessa standing in the warm glow of a room that had never truly made space for her. Then she looked back at Quentin. I think your family started one. She pulled her suitcase toward the door. This time Quentin did not stop her. Maybe because he thought she had nowhere to go. Maybe because he believed fear would bring her back before morning. Maybe because men like Quentin always mistook a woman's silence for surrender. Yvonne stepped outside into the cold, and the door closed behind her with a heavy, expensive click. Her phone buzzed before she reached the car. A bank notification flashed across the screen. Transaction declined. Joint credit card frozen. Yvonne opened her banking app with numb fingers. Her personal checking balance appeared, $43.18. For a moment, the night expanded around her huge, freezing merciless. No house, no working card, no family behind her, no husband beside her. Just a suitcase, a screenshot, and $43. Then another text came from Ethan. Don't sign anything. Whatever they gave you, don't touch it. Meet me tomorrow. I have more. Yvonne looked back at the glowing mansion. They had expected her to break. Instead, she got in the car, locked the doors, and drove into the dark with the envelope still unopened on the passenger seat. Yvonne drove for 20 minutes before she realized she had no destination. The road stretched ahead in long, black ribbons, wet from an earlier rain. Streetlights blurred against her windshield. Her suitcase rattled softly in the back seat, each time the car rolled over a rough patch of pavement. On the passenger seat sat Quentin's envelope. Thick, cream-colored, expensive. Even his cruelty had good stationery. Yvonne kept glancing at it like it might open by itself and bite her. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Quentin. You're making this harder than it has to be. Come back tomorrow morning and we'll handle this like adults. Yvonne stared at the message at a red light. Like adults. He had locked her credit card, put her suitcase outside, paraded another woman at a family dinner, and prepared divorce papers behind her back. But she was the childish one because she refused to collapse politely. She didn't reply. Another message arrived. Do not involve Ethan. He doesn't understand the situation. That was when Yvonne knew Ethan understood perfectly. She pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gas station and parked beneath a flickering light. For a moment, she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, watching strangers move in and out of the store with coffee cups, lottery tickets, cigarettes, normal problems, normal lives. Her life had split open in less than an hour. No, that wasn't true. It had been splitting open for years. Tonight was just the sound finally becoming loud enough to hear. Yvonne picked up the envelope. Her name was typed across the front. Yvonne Bates. Not Mrs. Bates. Not Yvonne. Formal. Cold. Legal. She opened it carefully. The first page was a separation agreement. Her eyes moved over paragraphs full of language designed to make her feel small, voluntary departure, emotional incompatibility, no admission of wrongdoing, mutual desire for privacy. Then she saw the financial section. Her stomach turned. Quentin wanted her to waive claims to future stock options, waive claims to executive bonuses, waive claims to the lake house improvements, waive spousal support. In exchange, he would offer her a one-time payment that looked generous at first glance until Yvonne realized it was less than what she had quietly contributed to his life over the past 5 years. Less than the private loan she had paid off, less than the renovations she funded, less than the money she spent keeping his family comfortable while they called her dependent behind her back. A laugh escaped her. Not because it was funny, because if she didn't laugh, she might scream. Then she found the paragraph that made her blood go cold. Both parties acknowledged that no separate inheritance funds were used for marital expenses or joint investment purposes. Yvonne read it twice, then a third time. Her mother's inheritance. They were trying to erase it before anyone could ask questions. Her hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't helplessness. It was rage, quiet, focused, useful. She took photos of every page. Then she uploaded them to the secure folder she had created earlier. The folder name was simple: Evidence. The word made her breathe easier. Not because it fixed anything, because it gave shape to the chaos. A car pulled into the space beside her. Yvonne quickly slid the papers back inside the envelope and locked the doors. For years, Quentin had made her feel dramatic for noticing patterns. Now patterns were saving her. She opened her banking app again. $43.18. Her joint credit card was frozen. Her personal credit card had expired last month, and she had never replaced it because Quentin always said, "Why do you need separate credit? We're married." She had believed that once. Marriage was supposed to be shared, but shared had become controlled. Controlled had become trapped. Yvonne searched her suitcase with frantic hands. Makeup bag, sweater, charger, old receipts, a paperback book she never finished. Then her fingers hit something stiff in the inner pocket. A small envelope. She pulled it out. Her breath caught. Cash. $800. Folded neatly in 20s and 50s. For a second, she couldn't understand why it was there. Then she remembered. Her mother. Lydia Bates had always been practical in a way that felt almost superstitious. Every woman needs money nobody can freeze. Lydia had told her years ago, pressing an envelope into her hand after the wedding. Not because you expect love to fail, because you respect yourself enough to have a door. Yvonne had laughed then. She had been so sure she would never need that door. Now, sitting under a gas station light with divorce papers on her passenger seat, she held the envelope to her chest and finally cried. Not loudly, not theatrically. Just one broken sob that seemed to come from somewhere older than tonight. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. She booked a room at the cheapest nearby motel with decent reviews. When she arrived, the clerk barely looked at her. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. The carpet had seen better decades. Her room had beige walls, a humming heater, and a bedspread with a pattern too ugly to describe. But the door locked, and nobody inside hated her. That was enough. Yvonne placed her suitcase on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed down on her. For the first time all night, there was no mansion noise, no Brianna laughing, no Quentin correcting her tone, no Eleanor watching her like an embarrassment in heels. Just Yvonne, and the woman she had become to survive them. Her phone lit up again. "Brianna, you should have left with Grace. Honestly, you made yourself look pathetic tonight." Yvonne stared at the message. Once, that would have destroyed her. She would have typed paragraphs defending herself, explaining, begging to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding her. Tonight, she took a screenshot, uploaded it, said nothing. Another message came from Brianna. "Quentin is being kind. Don't make him regret it." Screenshot, upload, silence. Then Ethan texted, "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." Yvonne's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, she typed, "What else do you know?" His reply took a minute. Then 3 screenshots appeared. Text between Brianna and Quentin. Yvonne opened the first. "Brianna, she'll cry. Let her. It helps your case." Quentin, "I don't want a scene." Brianna, "Then don't give her options." Yvonne's throat tightened. She opened the second. Quentin, "Dad says we need this settled before the equity date." Brianna, "Obviously. She doesn't deserve Bates' money." The third one made Yvonne sit up straight. Brianna, "What about the lake house?" Quentin, "Will handle her authorization." Brianna, "Good. She never checks paperwork anyway." Yvonne stared at the words until they blurred. Her authorization. The lake house. Her mother's money had helped renovate that place. Lydia had loved lakes. Yvonne had spent weekends choosing tiles, paying contractors, sanding old window frames until her hands blistered because Quentin said the house would be their quiet future. Their children someday, their summers, their peace. And now his family was discussing it like stolen furniture. A notification dropped from her email. Subject line, security. Alert, transfer attempt, blocked. Yvonne stopped breathing. She opened it. A large transfer had been attempted from her protected inheritance account earlier that evening. The request had been denied pending additional verification. Her inheritance account? Her mother's last gift? Yvonne stood so quickly the motel bed creaked behind her. All the grief inside her changed form. It sharpened. Quentin could betray her, humiliate her, replace her at a dinner table. But touching her mother's money, that was different. That was sacred ground. Yvonne called the bank's emergency fraud line with shaking fingers. While the hold music played, she looked at herself in the motel mirror. Mascara smudged, hair loose, eyes red. But beneath the wreckage, something unfamiliar stared back. Not the woman Quentin had taught to apologize. Not the woman Brianna had laughed at. Someone colder, clearer, awake. When the bank representative finally answered, Yvonne's voice came out steady. "My name is Yvonne Bates," she said. "I need to report an unauthorized transfer attempt." The representative began asking security questions. Yvonne answered each one. Date of birth, last 4 digits, mother's maiden name, Lydia. Saying it almost broke her again, but she held firm. After several minutes, the woman on the line said, "Mrs. Bates, we can freeze the account immediately while this is investigated." "Yes," Yvonne said. "Freeze it." "And do you know who may have attempted access?" Yvonne looked down at the envelope Quentin had given her, at the agreement asking her to waive claims, at the text about handling her authorization. Then she looked back at the woman in the mirror. "Yes," she said quietly. "I think I do." Outside, a siren wailed far away and faded into the night. Yvonne sat at the little motel desk, opened her laptop, and began organizing everything by time and date. Instagram story, suitcase, separation papers, frozen credit card, Brianna's text, Ethan's screenshots, bank alert. One by one, the pieces formed a timeline. And the timeline told a story Quentin would never be able to charm his way out of. At 2:13 a.m., Yvonne created one more document. She titled it, "What They Thought I Wouldn't Save." Then she wrote the first sentence. "They mistook my silence for weakness." And for the first time that night, she believed they were wrong. Yvonne barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dining room again. Vanessa sitting in her chair. Brianna laughing with a wine glass in her hand. Quentin looking embarrassed by her pain instead of ashamed of his betrayal. By 7 in the morning, the motel room felt too small to hold her thoughts. The heater rattled unevenly beside the window. Weak sunlight leaked through faded curtains. Somewhere outside, a truck engine growled to life. Normal morning sounds. But nothing about Yvonne's life felt normal anymore. She sat cross-legged on the motel bed, wearing Quentin's old college sweatshirt, the one she had accidentally packed, because it used to comfort her. Now it just smelled like a lie. Her laptop rested open in front of her, filled with folders, screenshots, timestamps, and notes. Evidence. She had spent half the night organizing everything, because if she stopped moving mentally, she might collapse emotionally. Her phone buzzed again. Quentin. She stared at the screen without answering. The call ended. Another came immediately, then another. On the fourth call, she finally picked up, what she said flatly. Silence met her for a second, probably because Quentin wasn't used to hearing that tone from her. Usually she sounded careful around him, soft, like someone approaching a wounded animal. This morning she sounded tired, and tired people stop negotiating with manipulation. "Where are you?" Quentin asked. Yvonne looked around the cheap motel room, at the stained lamp, the tiny coffee maker, the ugly floral curtains. Then she remembered the marble floors of the Bates mansion. I'm safe, she answered. That's not what I asked. Of course not. Control never liked vague answers. You froze the joint card, she said, instead. Quentin exhaled sharply. That was temporary. I needed to prevent irrational spending. Yvonne almost laughed. Irrational spending? Quentin, I bought groceries and your mother's birthday gifts with that card. You're emotional right now. There it was again. The word he used whenever he wanted her reality to sound unreliable. Yvonne rubbed her forehead slowly. You prepared divorce papers before telling me our marriage was over? I was trying to handle things efficiently. Efficiently. Another corporate word, as if she were a failed investment instead of his wife. You humiliated me in front of your family. I didn't tell Brianna to post that, but you didn't stop her either. Silence. Yvonne closed her eyes. That silence was becoming more honest than Quentin's actual words. Finally, he spoke again lower this time. Come home and we'll talk. Home. Interesting choice of word for a man who left her suitcase outside. I don't think I have one anymore, Yvonne replied quietly. Something shifted in Quentin's breathing. For a second, he sounded almost human again, almost regretful. You're overreacting. And there it was. The spell broke instantly. Yvonne leaned back against the motel headboard. No, she said calmly. I'm reacting exactly enough. Another silence stretched between them. Then Quentin changed tactics. I'm trying to protect both of us by hiding assets. His breathing stopped, just for a second, but Yvonne heard it. Excuse me. The lake house, she said evenly. My inheritance account, the authorization text. This time the silence lasted longer. When Quentin finally spoke, his voice had gone colder. You went through private messages. Yvonne stared at the ceiling in disbelief. That was his concern. Not the fraud. Not the betrayal. Privacy. You tried to access money my mother left me. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough. Ethan is feeding you half-truths because he's angry at Brianna. No, Yvonne said softly. I think Ethan is the only person in your family who still recognizes cruelty when he sees it. Quentin's patience cracked slightly. You're letting people poison your head. Yvonne sat upright. No, Quentin. You spent years doing that yourself. The line went quiet. For the first time in their marriage, she thought she might actually have surprised him, because she never pushed back this directly. Not when he dismissed her career, not when Brianna mocked her, not when Eleanor treated her like temporary staff instead of family. Yvonne had spent years confusing endurance with love. Now she wondered how much pain she could have avoided if she'd trusted her instincts earlier. Quentin spoke again, quieter now. What do you want from me? The question hit her unexpectedly hard, because once upon a time, the answer would have been simple. Love me honestly. Choose me publicly. Protect me the way I protected you. But now she didn't know. I want the truth, she said finally. You couldn't handle the truth. Yvonne smiled bitterly. That's convenient. You've always needed things emotionally softened. There it was again. The rewriting. Quentin had spent years framing deception as protection. Lying became kindness. Control became stability. Silencing her became keeping the peace. Yvonne suddenly remembered something small and terrible. 3 years ago, after one of Quentin's executive dinners, she overheard a woman ask him if he was married. And Quentin had hesitated, only for a second, but long enough for the memory to hurt now. When Yvonne confronted him later, he told her she was insecure. She apologized to him by the end of the night. God. How many times had she apologized for catching him hurting her? You know what the saddest part is? Yvonne asked quietly. Quentin sighed impatiently. What I really believed you loved me. The line fell silent again. Not defensive this time. Heavy. Yvonne almost wished he would yell. Anger was easier to survive than emptiness. Finally, Quentin spoke. I did love you. Did. Past tense. Funny how one word could finish a funeral. Yvonne swallowed hard against the sting in her throat. Then why does it feel like you were preparing to erase me? You're being dramatic. No, she whispered. I think I'm finally being accurate. He exhaled sharply. This is exactly why I wanted lawyers involved early. The sentence chilled her instantly. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded rehearsed, planned, strategic. Like he'd practiced seeing her as an opponent long before she knew she was in a fight. Yvonne's phone beeped softly with another notification. A new email. From the bank. She opened it while Quentin was still talking, and froze. Additional verification documents had been submitted overnight regarding her inheritance account, including a digital authorization form. Her pulse started hammering. Quentin, she said slowly, what did you submit authorization paperwork for my inheritance account? His hesitation was microscopic, but real. No. Lie. Yvonne knew it instantly, not because of evidence, because she finally remembered what truth sounded like. And this wasn't it. Don't lie to me anymore. I'm not lying. You are. His voice sharpened dangerously. You need to calm down. Yvonne laughed then. A real laugh this time. Short. Disbelieving. Do you know something terrifying? She asked softly. What I think this is the calmest I've been in years. The silence afterward felt different. Like Quentin finally understood something was slipping out of his control. Not the marriage. Her. You need to stop listening to other people and come home. He said again. Home. That word again. Yvonne looked around the motel room. It was ugly, cheap, lonely, but somehow she could breathe here. At the Bates mansion, she had spent years suffocating beautifully. No, she said. Yvonne, I'm done discussing this without legal representation. Quentin went completely still on the other end. You talked to a lawyer. Not yet. A lie. Her first one to him in years. And strangely, it felt less dirty than all the truth she used to swallow for his comfort. You don't need lawyers if we handle this privately, Quentin said quickly. Too quickly. There it was again. Fear. Not heartbreak. Exposure. Yvonne saw it clearly now. And once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. I'll have someone contact you, she said calmly. Then she hung up. Her hands trembled afterward, but not from weakness. From adrenaline. From grief. From finally standing still while someone else tried to push her. Her phone buzzed immediately. A text from Brianna. You're embarrassing yourself. Quentin was trying to be generous. Yvonne stared at the message for a long moment. Then another text appeared. Honestly, you should thank Vanessa. Quentin hasn't looked this happy in years. That one hurt. God, it hurt. For a second, Yvonne thought she might finally break apart. Instead, she screenshotted the message, added it to the folder. Evidence? Her phone buzzed again, this time from Ethan. Meet me at Blackwood Cafe at noon. There's more you need to see. And Yvonne? Don't trust anything Quentin says about the money. Yvonne read the message twice. Then she looked back at the motel mirror. Her reflection still looked exhausted, still looked wounded, but not helpless anymore. And maybe that terrified Quentin more than tears ever could. Blackwood Cafe sat on a quiet corner just outside downtown Chicago, tucked between a bookstore and a florist shop that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and rain. Yvonne arrived 15 minutes early, not because she was eager, because anxiety made waiting unbearable. She sat near the back window with both hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup she hadn't touched. Outside, people hurried past in wool coats and business shoes, carrying ordinary lives beneath gray winter skies. Inside the cafe, soft jazz played overhead. It felt strange that the world kept moving while hers had detonated. Yvonne checked the time again. 11:58 a.m. Then she saw Ethan walk through the door. He looked exhausted. Not dramatically exhausted. Not movie scene devastated. Just worn down in the quiet way people looked after realizing their marriage had been built beside lies instead of above truth. He spotted her immediately and approached carefully. Hey. Yvonne nodded once. Hi. Ethan sat across from her, loosening his scarf slowly. For a moment, neither spoke. They were two people connected by betrayal they hadn't chosen. Finally, Ethan sighed. She's at my house with her mother right now. Brianna. He nodded. She's furious. Yvonne almost laughed. Of course Brianna was furious. Cruel people always seemed offended when consequences interrupted their performance. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face. She's saying you're trying to destroy Quentin's career. Yvonne stared at him. He destroyed his own career. I know. And yours? A bitter smile flickered across Ethan's face. She says I betrayed her. The irony sat heavily between them. Yvonne looked down at her untouched coffee. Did you? Ethan gave a quiet, humorless laugh. No, I just stopped lying for her. Something about that sentence settled deep inside Yvonne's chest. Stopped lying for her? How many lies had Yvonne protected over the years? Because she thought love required loyalty, even when loyalty hurt. Ethan reached into his leather messenger bag. I brought you something. Yvonne's stomach tightened instantly. He slid a thin stack of printed screenshots across the table. Yvonne hesitated before touching them. Then she looked. The first screenshot showed a text conversation between Brianna and Quentin from 3 weeks earlier. Brianna, you need to stop dragging this out. Quentin, I'm handling it. Brianna, before or after she gets entitled to your equity, Dad's already stressed. Yvonne's throat tightened. Dad? Preston. So Quentin's father knew too. Maybe not every detail, but enough. She opened the second screenshot. Quentin, I just need her cooperative. Brianna? Then stop treating her like a wife. Yvonne looked away for a second. That one hurt more than the others, because Quentin already had stopped treating her like a wife. She just hadn't let herself name it yet. The late nights, the emotional distance, the way he stopped touching her absent-mindedly, the way every conversation started sounding like negotiation instead of intimacy. Yvonne remembered asking him 6 months ago if he still loved her. Quentin had smiled tiredly and said, "Why do you always need reassurance?" As if wanting love to feel visible was irrational. Ethan slid another screenshot forward. This one made Yvonne's pulse spike immediately. Brianna. Did she sign the lake paperwork yet? Quentin. Not officially. Brianna. Then use the digital authorization. She never reads the details anyway. Yvonne stared at the screen until the words blurred. Digital authorization. There it was again. The same phrase from the bank issue. The same phrase from the motel last night. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was pattern. Ethan lowered his voice. I don't know exactly what they were doing financially, but Brianna kept talking about your inheritance account like it was part of some bigger plan. Yvonne's fingers curled tightly around the papers. My mother protected that money for me. Ethan nodded carefully. I figured. Yvonne swallowed hard against the ache rising in her throat. Lydia Bates had not been rich in the flashy Bates family way. No country clubs, no luxury foundations, no political fundraiser dinners. But Lydia had been smart, careful, the kind of woman who clipped coupons while secretly building savings accounts. After Yvonne's wedding, Lydia had taken her aside in the kitchen while everyone else danced. You can love a man deeply, she'd whispered, without giving him every emergency exit you have. At the time, Yvonne thought her mother sounded cynical. Now she realized Lydia sounded experienced. What happens now? Ethan asked quietly. Yvonne looked up slowly. I don't know yet. That was the honest answer. Because beneath the anger and humiliation, grief still moved unpredictably inside her. Part of her still woke up expecting Quentin beside her. Part of her still remembered the man who used to bring her soup during night shifts. The man who kissed her forehead while she studied healthcare reports at midnight. But now those memories felt contaminated, like finding out your favorite childhood home had mold hidden behind the walls. Ethan leaned forward slightly. There's something else. Yvonne's stomach dropped. What? Ethan hesitated. I overheard Brianna talking to Preston 2 nights ago. Yvonne straightened immediately. What did they say? Ethan glanced around the cafe first, lowering his voice further. Preston said Quentin needed this finalized before the board announcement next quarter. Board announcement. Yvonne frowned. What board? Halden and Pierce is restructuring executive leadership. Yvonne felt cold suddenly. She remembered Quentin acting strange for months, secretive phone calls, stress about timelines, constant obsession with optics. He's trying to make partner-level executive status, she realized softly. Ethan nodded. And apparently, divorce complications don't look good during internal evaluations. Yvonne leaned back slowly. There it was. Not love, not heartbreak. Brand management. The realization should have shattered her completely. Instead, it strangely cleared the fog. Quentin wasn't confused. He wasn't emotionally overwhelmed. He was strategic. That hurt more. But it also made him easier to see clearly. Yvonne looked down at the screenshots again. Every text sounded transactional, efficient, cruel, like discussing damage control after a public relations problem, not dismantling a woman's life. You know the worst part, Yvonne said softly. Ethan watched her carefully. I would have supported him through any career pressure if he'd just told me the truth. And she meant it. God, she meant it. Yvonne had moved cities for Quentin, left work for Quentin, stood beside him through panic attacks before presentations and sleepless nights before promotions. She would have fought with him instead of against him. But Quentin never gave her the dignity of honesty. He gave her strategy. Ethan looked genuinely guilty. I should have said something sooner. You were trying to protect your marriage, too. A sad smile crossed his face. Yeah. Look how well that worked out. For the first time all morning, Yvonne smiled faintly, too. Not because anything was funny, because pain sometimes recognized itself in other people. Ethan reached into his bag one last time. This is the thing you really need. He handed her a business card. Olivia Grant, family law attorney. Yvonne blinked. You already talked to a lawyer. My cousin used her during a horrible divorce, Ethan explained. She's brutal when she needs to be. Yvonne turned the card over slowly in her hands. Olivia Grant. The name sounded familiar. Then it clicked. Wait. Olivia Grant from Northwestern. Ethan nodded. You know her. Yvonne stared at the card. She was my roommate freshman year. For the first time since entering the cafe, Ethan looked relieved. Good. Then maybe she'll help. Yvonne's chest tightened unexpectedly. Olivia used to call Yvonne the strongest woman she knew. Back before marriage slowly turned strength into accommodation. Back before Yvonne learned how to make herself smaller for love. You really think I need a lawyer? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered with painful honesty. I think Quentin already has one. The truth landed hard because it was undeniable. Quentin had prepared documents, prepared timing, prepared financial protection, prepared narratives about her emotional instability. He had entered the end of their marriage already armored. Yvonne had entered it still believing she was loved. Her phone buzzed across the cafe table. Quentin. Again. Then another text appeared immediately afterward. We need to talk before this gets uglier. Yvonne stared at the message. For years, ugliness meant conflict to her. Now she realized ugliness could also mean silence stretched so long that abuse learned to dress itself as normal. Ethan noticed her expression. What did he say? Yvonne locked her phone screen. He's scared. Ethan blinked. How can you tell? Yvonne looked toward the cafe window where snow had begun drifting lightly through the gray afternoon. Because he keeps trying to get me alone before I talk to anyone else. Something shifted in Ethan's face then. Recognition. Because manipulative people relied on isolation the same way drowning people relied on air. Yvonne slipped Olivia Grant's card into her purse carefully. For the first time since the mansion dinner, she felt something unfamiliar moving beneath the grief. Not hope exactly, something steadier. Preparation. And maybe that was more dangerous. Olivia Grant's office sat on the 32nd floor of a steel and glass building overlooking downtown Chicago. Everything about the space felt sharp. Sharp furniture, sharp city views, sharp silence. The receptionist led Yvonne down a long hallway lined with framed degrees and awards. Every step made her more aware of how little sleep she'd had in the last 48 hours. Her reflection in the glass walls looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, hair pulled into a rushed knot, one small suitcase worth of clothes waiting back at the motel. 5 years of marriage reduced to screenshots and legal fear. When the office door opened, Olivia Grant looked up from her desk and froze. Yvonne. For the first time in 2 days, Yvonne nearly cried for a reason that wasn't humiliation. Olivia stood immediately and crossed the room in heels that clicked sharply against hardwood floors. A second later, she wrapped Yvonne in a fierce hug. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered. "What happened to you?" And somehow that question hurt more than all the others, because Olivia said it like she remembered who Yvonne used to be. Not fragile, not difficult, not emotional, strong, capable. Yvonne laughed weakly against tears. "That's a long story." Olivia pulled back, studying her face carefully. "You look exhausted." "I think I am." "Sit down." Yvonne sat in the leather chair across from Olivia's desk, while her old friend closed the office blinds for privacy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Olivia folded her arms. "Start from the beginning." So Yvonne did. The mansion, the Instagram story, Vanessa, the divorce papers, the frozen credit card, the inheritance account, the screenshots from Ethan, everything. Olivia listened without interrupting once. That alone nearly shattered Yvonne. She had gotten so used to being corrected halfway through her own feelings that uninterrupted listening felt foreign. When she finally finished, silence filled the office. Olivia leaned back slowly in her chair. Then she said 3 words. "That's not normal." Yvonne blinked. "What?" Olivia's eyes sharpened. "You've been emotionally manipulated for years." The sentence landed heavily. Not because Yvonne had never thought it, because hearing it spoken aloud made it harder to deny. Olivia opened a legal pad. "First things first. Did you sign anything? No, Mer. Good." Olivia nodded, once satisfied. "Did Quentin threaten you directly?" "Not exactly. That usually means yes." Yvonne almost smiled. Almost. Olivia held out her hand. "Show me everything." For the next hour, Yvonne handed over screenshots, bank alerts, text messages, photos of the separation agreement, and notes from the motel room. Olivia's expression darkened more with every page. Then she stopped at one screenshot, the text about the digital authorization. Her eyes narrowed immediately. "How protected is your inheritance account?" "My mother set it up separately before she died." "Good. That helps." Olivia looked up. "But Yvonne, if someone attempted unauthorized access tied to marital pressure, this gets very ugly, very fast." Yvonne swallowed hard. Ugly. Everybody kept using that word. But somehow when Olivia said it, it sounded different. Not shameful. Dangerous. Olivia continued scanning documents. Then she paused at the separation agreement and let out a cold laugh. "Oh, Quentin thinks you're stupid." Yvonne stiffened automatically. Olivia noticed immediately. "Hey." Her voice softened. "That wasn't aimed at you?" Yvonne looked down quietly. "It's fine." "No, it's not." Olivia leaned forward. "Stop doing that. Doing what minimizing yourself before other people can." The room went silent. Yvonne stared at her hands. God, how long had she been doing that? Olivia tapped the financial section of the agreement. "This settlement is garbage. He's trying to rush you before executive equity distribution." "So Ethan was right?" "Oh, Ethan's very right." Olivia removed her glasses. "Men like Quentin always believe timing is power." Yvonne frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means he thinks if he controls the pace, the information, and your emotional state, he controls the outcome." The truth of it made Yvonne cold, because that described her entire marriage. Olivia opened another folder. Tell me about your career before Quentin. Yvonne blinked at the sudden shift. What your work? I was an operations administrator at Northlake Medical Network. Olivia nodded slowly. You loved that job. Yvonne looked surprised. How do you know that? Because you used to talk about healthcare logistics like other people talk about falling in love. For a second, Yvonne forgot the divorce. Forgot Quentin. Forgot Brianna. She remembered herself at 28, standing in hospital hallways, solving staffing disasters with coffee in one hand and spreadsheets in the other. She remembered feeling competent, useful, respected, not tolerated, not managed, respected. I was good at it, she admitted softly. You were incredible at it, Olivia corrected. You helped redesign emergency intake systems during flu season. Yvonne laughed faintly. You remember that, Yvonne, you practically saved that hospital from collapsing every winter? The words hit unexpectedly hard, because Quentin spent years slowly reducing her career into something small. Administrative stuff, paperwork, flexible little projects. Eventually, Yvonne stopped speaking proudly about her accomplishments at all. Olivia studied her carefully. He made you smaller. Yvonne looked away. Not immediately, not obviously, but yes, little by little, until she barely recognized herself. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Quentin. Again. Olivia looked at the screen. How many times has he called today? 9. Answer once. Yvonne frowned. What? Olivia leaned back calmly. I want to hear how he talks to you. Yvonne hesitated before answering the call. Hello? Quentin's relief was immediate. Finally. Yvonne glanced at Olivia. What do you want? Where are you? Same first question. Always location first, control first. I'm busy. With who, Olivia raised one eyebrow slowly. Yvonne suddenly noticed how quickly Quentin's tone shifted whenever he lacked information. I'm handling things, he continued. You don't need outsiders involved. Olivia silently mouthed, There it is. Yvonne's stomach tightened. Quentin kept talking. You're overwhelmed right now, and people are going to manipulate your emotions. Olivia actually rolled her eyes. Yvonne almost laughed despite herself. Interesting, Yvonne said quietly. What is that? You think I'm only vulnerable when someone else influences me. Quentin went silent briefly. Then his voice hardened slightly. You know exactly what I mean. No, Yvonne replied. I don't think I do anymore. Olivia gave her a small, approving nod. Quentin exhaled sharply. Yvonne, this can still stay private. Private, again. Everything needed silence to survive. His cheating, his manipulation, his financial games. Private was where accountability went to die. I've retained legal counsel, Yvonne said calmly. The silence on the other end became immediate and absolute. Then you what? Olivia smiled faintly. Yvonne almost felt it too. That tiny shift. Power moving. She'll contact your attorney. Who is she? Yvonne looked directly at Olivia. Someone who listens when I speak. Quentin's breathing changed. Anger now. Real anger. Not polished executive calm. Are you seriously trying to turn this into war? Yvonne thought about the suitcase outside the mansion. The frozen credit card, the manipulation, the forged authorization attempt. Then she answered softly, No, Quentin. I think you already did. She hung up before he could respond. The office went quiet. Yvonne's hands shook slightly afterward. Olivia noticed. That reaction, Olivia said. That's conditioning. Yvonne looked confused. You're afraid every time you upset him. The truth hurt because it was accurate. Olivia stood and walked toward the massive window overlooking the city. Here's what's going to happen next, she said calmly. We freeze every vulnerable asset. We document every communication, and we stop letting Quentin define reality for you. Yvonne swallowed hard. The city stretched endlessly below them. Cars moving, people living, entire worlds continuing. And for the first time in years, Yvonne felt something strange begin to surface beneath the grief. Not revenge, Not yet. Something quieter. The possibility that her life might still belong to her. Olivia turned back toward her. One more question. When was the last time you felt safe in your marriage? Yvonne opened her mouth automatically, then stopped, because she genuinely didn't know. And somehow that answer terrified her more than the divorce itself. Yvonne moved into the temporary apartment 3 days later. Olivia insisted on it. No more motels, she said firmly. You need somewhere secure, private, and legally documented as your current residence. The apartment sat high above the city on the 19th floor of a modern building wrapped in glass and steel. It wasn't as large as the Bates mansion, but the silence inside felt completely different. Peaceful. Not tense, not performative. No footsteps that made her anxious. No carefully measured words. No waiting for someone else's mood to decide whether the evening stayed calm. The first night there, Yvonne stood barefoot in the kitchen, eating takeout noodles directly from the carton while wearing oversized sweatpants. And suddenly, she started crying, because Quentin would have hated this version of her. Too casual, too messy, too human. The realization hurt almost as much as losing him. How long had she been editing herself to remain lovable? Her phone buzzed against the counter. Another unknown email address. Yvonne froze instantly. For the past 2 days, anonymous messages had started arriving randomly. Most were useless gossip or cruel speculation from people in Quentin's social circle. But this one had an attachment. Her pulse quickened. She opened it carefully. 3 photographs appeared on screen. Quentin and Vanessa walking into a luxury hotel downtown. Time-stamped. 7 months ago. Yvonne's stomach dropped. 7 months. She knew exactly where she had been that week. At the hospital with Eleanor. Eleanor Bates had undergone minor surgery complications, and Yvonne spent nearly every day helping manage medications, nurses' transportation meals, follow-up appointments. Quentin had thanked her for holding the family together. While sleeping with another woman, Yvonne sat down slowly at the kitchen island because her knees suddenly felt weak. The email contained only one sentence beneath the photos. You deserved the truth sooner. No signature. Nothing else. Yvonne stared at Quentin's face in the photos. Relaxed, smiling, happy, not guilty. That part hurt most. People always imagined Betrayal looked nervous or chaotic. But Quentin looked comfortable. Like deception had become natural. Her phone rang. Olivia. Yvonne answered immediately. I got another email. Forward it to me right now, Olivia said. Within seconds, Yvonne sent everything over. Several minutes later, Olivia called back. The metadata looks real. Yvonne closed her eyes. I know. Do you recognize the hotel, yes? Her voice cracked slightly. It was during Eleanor's surgery recovery. Silence filled the line briefly. Then Olivia spoke carefully. Yvonne, you need to prepare yourself emotionally. For what? This probably wasn't recent. Yvonne looked back at the photographs. The ease between Quentin and Vanessa suddenly seemed practiced. Not new, not accidental. Practiced. Her stomach twisted violently. I keep thinking about all the times he made me feel paranoid, she whispered. Olivia's voice softened. That's how manipulation works. They make your instincts feel embarrassing until you stop trusting them. Yvonne leaned against the counter. 3 years ago, she found lipstick on Quentin's wine glass after a corporate fundraiser. He told her she was imagining things. 6 months later, Vanessa Monroe joined his department. After that, Quentin became colder in ways difficult to explain to outsiders. Nothing dramatic enough to point at, just absence, distance. He stopped kissing her without being asked, stopped looking at her during conversations, stopped noticing when she changed her hair. Yvonne used to stand beside him at events feeling invisible while he lit up for everyone else, especially Vanessa. God, how had she convinced herself that was normal? Olivia, she said slowly, what if there's more financial stuff we haven't found yet? There probably is. The honesty almost knocked the breath out of her. What do I do? We dig. Yvonne laughed weakly. You say that like we're investigating a corporation. In some ways we are. Olivia paused. People like Quentin treat marriages like image structures. They manage appearances carefully. Affairs, money timelines, it all overlaps. Yvonne looked out at the city lights below her apartment windows. I feel stupid. No, Olivia said immediately. You feel betrayed? Those are not the same thing. Tears burned unexpectedly behind Yvonne's eyes. Olivia continued, I need you to understand something important. Intelligent women get manipulated every day, especially empathetic ones. Yvonne wiped at her eyes angrily. I should have seen it. Maybe. But he also should have loved you honestly. The simplicity of that statement nearly broke her, because she had spent years believing love meant becoming more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. Never demanding too much, never making Quentin uncomfortable. And somehow, even after sacrificing pieces of herself, she still ended up abandoned. A notification interrupted her thoughts. Text from Quentin. We need to stop outsiders from escalating this. Yvonne stared at the screen in disbelief. Outsiders. Like she wasn't the center of the marriage he detonated. Another message arrived immediately. You're emotional right now, and people are taking advantage of that. Same tactic. Again. Yvonne suddenly saw the pattern so clearly, it almost embarrassed her. Every conversation with Quentin relied on one idea. If she was emotional, she was unreliable. If she was hurt, she was irrational. If she reacted naturally to betrayal, her reactions became the problem instead of the betrayal itself. It was psychological sleight of hand, and once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. Olivia's voice pulled her back. Yvonne, I'm here. Don't answer him tonight. Okay, and lock down every remaining account. Yvonne nodded automatically before realizing Olivia couldn't see her. Right. After the call ended, the apartment felt too quiet again. Yvonne walked slowly into the bedroom. Her suitcase still sat half unpacked near the wall. For years, she'd lived inside beautiful spaces that never truly belonged to her emotionally. This apartment was temporary, but somehow it already felt safer than the mansion ever had. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Ethan. Brianna's spiraling. She thinks Quentin's going to blame her for everything. Yvonne stared at the text. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for Brianna. Almost. Then she remembered the Instagram story. Finally getting rid of her, not a misunderstanding. Not accidental cruelty. Deliberate humiliation. Yvonne typed carefully. Did she know about Vanessa the whole time? The typing bubble appeared immediately. Then yes, I think she encouraged it. Yvonne's chest tightened painfully. Of course she did. Vanessa looked polished, executive, expensive. The kind of woman Brianna would proudly place beside Quentin at parties, not Yvonne with her hospital schedules and practical shoes and emotional honesty. A second message came from Ethan. Brianna said Vanessa fit Quentin's future better. That one sliced deep. Because beneath all the rage and betrayal, one terrible insecurity still survived inside Yvonne. Maybe Quentin really had outgrown her. Maybe she had become too ordinary beside his ambition. The thought sat heavy in her chest until another memory surfaced unexpectedly. 3 years ago. Northlake Medical Network. A flu season crisis. Entire departments overwhelmed. Systems collapsing. Yvonne working 16-hour days, reorganizing intake flow, while senior administrators panicked around her. At the end of the week, Dr. Marissa Cole had looked at her and said, You walk into chaos and somehow make people breathe again. Back then, Yvonne believed she was capable, valuable, strong. Quentin didn't create that woman. He just slowly convinced her she no longer existed. Yvonne walked back into the kitchen and reopened her laptop, not to reread Quentin's texts, not to stare at Vanessa's photographs. Instead, she opened LinkedIn for the first time in almost a year. Her old professional profile appeared. Healthcare operations specialist, system crisis management, hospital administration strategy. Yvonne stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she updated her status to available for consulting opportunities. Her pulse jumped while pressing save. It felt terrifying and strangely freeing. Another notification appeared almost immediately. A message request from Dr. Marissa Cole. Heard rumors you left the Bates bubble. Call me tomorrow. We miss your brain over here. Yvonne laughed softly through sudden tears. Not your marriage, not your social status, not your husband. Your brain. God. She had almost forgotten she possessed one outside surviving Quentin. The city lights shimmered through the apartment windows, while snow drifted silently beyond the glass. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, Yvonne felt something other than grief pressing against her ribs. Possibility, small, fragile, but alive. Then another anonymous email notification appeared on her screen. Subject line: Vanessa wasn't the first lie. Yvonne's stomach dropped instantly. Slowly, she clicked it open. Yvonne stared at the subject line for almost 30 seconds before opening the email. Her heartbeat thudded painfully against her ribs. Vanessa wasn't the first lie. The message itself was short, painfully short. If you want the truth, stop looking at the affair and start looking at the money. Quentin's been hiding more than Vanessa. Attached beneath the message was a compressed folder. Yvonne hesitated only a moment before downloading it. Inside were screenshots, expense reports, corporate reimbursement forms, travel itineraries, and one spreadsheet labeled Consulting Allocations Private. Her stomach twisted instantly. She opened the file. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Consulting fees, transfers, shell vendor payments. Some were highlighted in red. One name appeared repeatedly: Monroe Strategic Solutions, Vanessa Monroe. Yvonne sat very still. Because Vanessa didn't own a consulting company, at least not publicly. Her phone rang. Olivia. Yvonne answered immediately. I just got another email. Forward everything Olivia said. Within minutes, Olivia called back again. This time her voice sounded sharper. Yvonne, where are you right now? At the apartment. Good. Stay there. Yvonne's pulse quickened. What is it? I think someone inside Halden and Pierce is leaking internal financial documents. Yvonne looked back at the spreadsheet. What does that mean? It means Quentin may have used company money or fake vendor channels to move assets around. Yvonne's chest tightened. Is that illegal? Olivia let out a dry laugh. Oh, potentially very. Silence stretched between them. Yvonne looked out at the snowy skyline beyond her apartment windows. At some point, this story had stopped feeling like heartbreak and started feeling like exposure. Quentin wasn't just dishonest emotionally. He might actually be corrupt. Olivia spoke again. I'm bringing in a forensic accountant, someone who tracks financial manipulation. I want every account Quentin touched reviewed. Yvonne rubbed her forehead slowly. This is insane. No, Olivia corrected calmly. This is calculated. The distinction mattered. Insane implied chaos. Quentin was not chaotic. Everything he did had timing, structure, intent. Even the divorce papers were strategically timed around executive equity dates. Yvonne suddenly remembered Quentin staying awake late at night over the last year laptop glowing beside him while he claimed he was preparing presentations. Sometimes he snapped if she walked too close to the screen. Back then, she told herself successful men were stressed. Now, every memory looked different. You still there? Olivia asked. Yeah. Listen carefully to me. From now on, do not confront Quentin with specifics. Why? Because if he's hiding money, you never warned someone before tracing the trail. Yvonne swallowed hard. The idea of Quentin deliberately manipulating finances made her feel physically ill. Not because she thought rich people were above greed, because she realized how calmly he'd looked at her while doing it. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Quentin. You're letting people poison this situation. We can still solve this privately before outsiders get involved. Outsiders. Again, Yvonne almost smiled bitterly. Funny how truth always became outside interference when manipulators lost control of the narrative. Olivia's voice interrupted her thoughts. I'm going to schedule an emergency asset protection filing tomorrow morning. What does that do? It prevents certain transfers while we investigate. Yvonne leaned against the counter. And if Quentin already moved money, then we follow where it went. There was something terrifyingly calm about Olivia. Not cruel, not dramatic, just experienced. Like she'd seen men like Quentin before, and maybe she had. After the call ended, Yvonne walked slowly through the apartment. The place still looked temporary, half-unpacked suitcase, minimal furniture, no framed photos yet, but for the first time in years, every object around her belonged only to her emotional reality. No pretending, no smiling through discomfort for Quentin's career dinners, no carefully managed silence. Her laptop chimed softly. New message request. Not anonymous this time. Harper Lane. Yvonne frowned. The name sounded vaguely familiar. She opened it carefully. Hi. You don't know me personally, but I work at Halden and Pierce. I'm reaching out because I think you deserve to understand what's happening before Quentin controls the story completely. I can't talk openly through company systems, but Vanessa Monroe has been helping Quentin hide things for months, and Vanessa is starting to panic. Yvonne's pulse spiked. She typed carefully. Who are you exactly? The reply came quickly. Harper Lane. I'm Vanessa's executive assistant. And before you ask, no, I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because Quentin and Vanessa crossed lines that could destroy other people too. Yvonne stared at the messages. Executive assistant. That explained the access. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then what lines? Harper responded almost immediately. Expense manipulation, vendor rerouting, corporate travel misuse, and honestly, Vanessa thought Quentin was going to leave you months ago. That's why she got reckless. Yvonne's vision blurred briefly. Months. Not weeks, not recent confusion, months. Harper sent another message before Yvonne could respond. I also think Quentin used company channels to hide personal asset movement before the executive restructuring announcement. Executive restructuring. The same thing Ethan mentioned. Everything connected. Yvonne suddenly understood why Quentin sounded desperate every time he said private. Private wasn't about dignity. It was about containment. Her phone rang again. This time, Quentin himself. Yvonne stared at it, then declined the call. Immediately, another text appeared. You need to stop talking to people at my company. Her stomach dropped. How did he know? Then realization hit. Someone had already warned him. Vanessa. Or Harper had been noticed. The control Quentin usually wore so smoothly was cracking. Yvonne typed slowly. You seem nervous. 3 dots appeared instantly, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, I'm trying to protect you. Yvonne laughed softly to herself. Protect her. The man who froze her accounts and left her suitcase outside wanted credit for protection. Another memory surfaced suddenly. Last Christmas. Yvonne accidentally contradicted Quentin during dinner with investors. Nothing major, just a correction about a vacation timeline. Later that night, Quentin closed their bedroom door and said, You embarrass me when you speak impulsively in front of important people. Yvonne apologized for an hour. Tonight, she finally understood something horrifying. Quentin's love had always depended on performance. Be calm, be polished, be supportive, be small enough not to disrupt his image. And whenever she failed, he punished her emotionally until she corrected herself. Her phone buzzed again. Harper. Be careful. Vanessa told someone Quentin's biggest concern isn't the divorce itself. It's the ethics review. Yvonne sat upright instantly. Ethics review, she typed quickly. What ethics review? Harper replied, Internal review tied to executive promotions. If enough financial misconduct surfaces, Quentin could lose partner track eligibility. There it was. Finally, the real fear: not losing Yvonne, losing status, losing power, losing the future he built on carefully managed appearances. And suddenly, Yvonne understood why Quentin sounded more panicked about lawyers than divorce. Marriage ending hurt him privately. Exposure threatened him publicly. The distinction made her feel strangely calm, because once you understood what someone truly feared, manipulation stopped feeling magical. Her phone rang once more. Olivia again. "I've scheduled a meeting," Olivia said immediately. "With who?" "A forensic accountant and a corporate ethics specialist." Yvonne blinked. "This is becoming huge." "It already was," Olivia answered quietly. "You just didn't know it yet." Yvonne moved toward the apartment window slowly. Snow drifted across the city in soft white streaks. Below, thousands of strangers lived ordinary lives, while hers transformed into something she barely recognized. "What happens now?" she asked. Olivia's voice remained calm. "Now we stop reacting emotionally and start building a case." A case. The word should have terrified her. Instead, it steadied her. Because for the first time since the mansion dinner, Yvonne wasn't just surviving Quentin's decisions. She was finally seeing them clearly. And clarity was dangerous, especially to men who relied on confusion. Then Olivia added one final sentence. "Yvonne, I think Quentin's company may want to speak with you directly." Yvonne's breath caught. "Why?" "Because if these documents are real," Olivia said quietly, "you may be holding evidence they can't afford to ignore." The conference room at Halden and Pierce Capital looked exactly how Yvonne imagined powerful people wanted morality to look. Glass walls, muted gray carpeting, perfect lighting, expensive silence, a long, polished table stretched beneath hanging pendant lights while the Chicago skyline shimmered behind floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything felt controlled, except Quentin. Yvonne noticed it immediately the second she walked in beside Olivia. He stood near the far end of the room in a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. Usually, Quentin wore confidence like custom tailoring. Today, it looked borrowed. Not gone, but slipping. Vanessa Monroe sat 3 chairs away from him, stiff-backed and pale beneath flawless makeup. She avoided looking directly at either Quentin or Yvonne. At the head of the table sat Cynthia Reed, Chief Ethics Officer for Halden and Pierce. Beside her were 2 attorneys and a senior HR executive named Marcus Bell. Nobody smiled. Good. Yvonne was tired of smiling rooms, pretending ugly things were elegant. Cynthia stood politely. "Mrs. Bates, thank you for coming." Yvonne nodded once. Olivia remained beside her like steel, wrapped in calmness. Quentin's eyes locked onto Yvonne immediately, not lovingly, assessing, trying to predict, the way executives studied negotiations before deciding which strategy to use. Yvonne suddenly realized something painful. Quentin had probably spent years approaching conflicts in their marriage exactly this way. Not emotionally, strategically. "Let's begin," Cynthia said. Everyone sat. The room settled into tense silence. Cynthia folded her hands neatly. "We understand there are concerns involving potential financial misconduct tied to executive expense structures and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Corporate language. Careful. Sanitized. Even betrayal sounded professional in buildings like this." Quentin leaned forward smoothly. "With respect, this is clearly a personal marital dispute being exaggerated by emotional circumstances." There it was immediately. Emotional. Yvonne almost smiled. He really only knew one script. Olivia spoke before Yvonne could. "Then I'm sure your client won't mind explaining the vendor irregularities tied to Monroe Strategic Solutions." Quentin's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Vanessa looked down at the table. Cynthia's eyes sharpened slightly. "Mr. Bates," she said calmly, "we'll ask everyone to answer directly today." Yvonne watched Quentin carefully. He still looked composed, but she knew him well enough to recognize pressure beneath polish. His right thumb rubbed lightly against his index finger, a tiny habit he had whenever he felt cornered. "I've already stated," Quentin said evenly, that any vendor relationships were legitimate consulting allocations. Olivia slid a folder across the table. Interesting, because Monroe Strategic Solutions doesn't appear operationally active. One of the attorneys opened the folder. The silence that followed felt heavier this time. Quentin looked toward Vanessa for half a second. Tiny, quick, but desperate enough for Yvonne to notice. Vanessa still refused to meet his eyes. Good. Let him feel alone. Cynthia turned toward Yvonne. Mrs. Bates, would you like to explain how these materials came into your possession? The room shifted toward her. Yvonne felt her pulse spike. For years, Quentin had trained her to second-guess herself in rooms like this. Too emotional, too reactive, too sensitive. But Olivia's voice echoed quietly in her mind. Stop letting him define reality for you. Yvonne folded her hands together to stop them trembling. I didn't come here because my marriage ended, she said calmly. I came because I discovered evidence suggesting my husband may have hidden financial activity while attempting to pressure me into signing legal agreements. No shaking, no tears, just truth. Quentin stared at her differently then, like he no longer recognized the woman speaking. Good. Maybe she didn't recognize herself either. Marcus Bell, the HR executive, adjusted his glasses. Pressure in what sense? Yvonne inhaled slowly. The night I discovered my husband intended to divorce me, my suitcase had already been placed outside our home. My access to joint financial accounts was frozen shortly afterward. Vanessa's face paled further. Quentin immediately cut in. That was temporary financial caution during an unstable emotional situation. Yvonne turned toward him. You mean my emotional reaction to discovering your affair at a family dinner? Silence. Sharp silence. Cynthia looked directly at Quentin now. Was Ms. Monroe involved in a romantic relationship with you while employed under your executive division? Quentin answered too quickly. No. Vanessa finally looked up, and that was the moment Yvonne knew. Fear. Not guilt. Fear. Vanessa wasn't afraid of hurting Yvonne anymore. She was afraid Quentin would let her drown alone. Olivia spoke smoothly. We also have hotel records, travel overlaps, and reimbursement inconsistencies. Another folder slid across the table. Quentin's composure cracked slightly this time. Not dramatically, but enough. Yvonne noticed his shoulders stiffen. Marcus opened several pages slowly, then looked toward Vanessa. Ms. Monroe. Vanessa swallowed hard. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then finally, I was told Quentin and Yvonne were separating. Yvonne closed her eyes briefly. There it was. The partial truth. Enough honesty to protect herself. Not enough to fully expose Quentin yet. Quentin immediately leaned toward the table. This has nothing to do with company ethics. Cynthia's expression remained unreadable. An undisclosed executive relationship combined with suspicious vendor routing absolutely concerns company ethics. The room went still again. Quentin looked at Yvonne, actually looked at her, and for the first time since the mansion dinner, she saw something besides irritation in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. Not about losing her. About losing status. Losing the image he spent years constructing. It should have satisfied her. Instead, it made her strangely sad. Because she realized Quentin had probably loved success more deeply than he ever loved intimacy. Yvonne suddenly remembered nights he stayed awake, rehearsing presentations in bathroom mirrors. The way his entire mood depended on promotions, rankings, titles approval. He didn't just want power. He needed it to feel valuable. And somewhere along the way, he started treating people like extensions of that goal, including her. Cynthia turned back toward Yvonne. Mrs. Bates, are you claiming there were attempts to conceal marital assets? Yes. And do you have documentation supporting that claim? Olivia answered calmly. We do. Another folder. Another set of papers. The room grew quieter with every page. Marcus flipped through screenshots from the separation agreement, the inheritance authorization issue, and the messages Ethan provided. Then he stopped at one specific screenshot. She'll cry. Let her. It helps your case. Marcus looked up slowly. Who wrote this? Yvonne answered quietly. Quentin's sister. Quentin looked furious now. Not embarrassed, not remorseful. Furious. Because the strategy was visible, because manipulation always looked uglier under fluorescent lighting. This is absurd, he snapped. Private family conversations are being weaponized. Olivia tilted her head slightly. You attempted to weaponize her emotional reactions first. That landed hard. Even Cynthia's expression shifted slightly. Vanessa finally spoke again, voice small this time. Quentin said the divorce would already be finalized before the ethics review. The room froze. Quentin turned toward her sharply. Vanessa. But she kept going. He said there wouldn't be complications if everything stayed private. There was that word again. Private. Yvonne almost laughed from exhaustion. Quentin's entire life depended on darkness. Private finances, private lies, private humiliation, private control. But truth had entered the room now, and truth was loud. Cynthia closed the folder carefully. Mr. Bates, she said calmly, pending further investigation, you are being placed on immediate administrative leave. The silence afterward felt enormous. Quentin stared at her. What effective? Immediately. His face changed completely then. Not grief, not heartbreak, panic. Pure panic. The kind powerful men wore when they realized consequences had finally learned their names. Quentin turned toward Yvonne slowly, and for one terrifying second, she saw genuine hatred flash across his face. Not loud, not explosive, cold, controlled, blaming, as if this entire collapse belonged to her instead of him. Her stomach tightened instinctively. Old fear, conditioned fear. But Olivia shifted slightly beside her, a silent reminder. You are not alone anymore. Quentin stood abruptly. This meeting is over. No, Cynthia replied evenly. Your participation is. Marcus gathered documents calmly while the attorneys exchanged quiet remarks. Vanessa looked close to tears, and Yvonne just sat there breathing carefully. Because for the first time since the mansion dinner, Quentin no longer looked untouchable. He looked exposed. Her phone buzzed softly beneath the table. Brianna. Yvonne ignored it. Another call immediately followed, then another. Finally, a voicemail notification appeared. Yvonne pressed play silently. Brianna's voice exploded through the speaker. You selfish little bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Quentin's career is collapsing because you couldn't leave quietly. Yvonne stared ahead at the skyline beyond the glass walls. For years, they had mistaken her silence for weakness. Now they were finally learning the difference. The voicemail from Brianna spread through Yvonne's apartment like poison. You selfish little bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Quentin's career is collapsing because you couldn't leave quietly? Yvonne replayed it twice, not because she enjoyed hearing it, because she wanted to remember something important. This was who Brianna had always been, underneath the polished hair designer handbags and perfectly filtered family photos. Cruel. Not accidentally cruel. Not emotionally reactive. Deliberately cruel. Yvonne saved the voicemail to her evidence folder. Then she muted her phone and sat quietly on the couch while snow drifted beyond the apartment windows. For the first time in days, Quentin wasn't the loudest thought in her head. It was exhaustion. Bone-deep exhaustion. Not just from the affair. From years of performing emotional labor for people who treated her kindness like a resource they were entitled to consume. Her phone buzzed again despite being muted. Notifications flooded the screen. Unknown numbers, social media tags, message requests. Something had leaked. Yvonne opened Instagram cautiously. Her stomach dropped. Someone inside Halden and Pierce had already started talking. Nothing official. Just whispers, disguised as vague posts. Corporate king caught mixing business with pleasure. Turns out the suburban power couple wasn't so perfect. Women always know before the public does. The comments were worse. People loved scandals when rich families fell apart. especially beautiful scandals, especially humiliating ones. Yvonne's chest tightened painfully. This was the part she dreaded. Not Quentin. Not even the divorce. Public attention. Being turned into entertainment. Another notification appeared. Brianna had posted. Of course she had. Yvonne clicked the story before she could stop herself. Brianna sat in perfect lighting with glossy makeup and fake red eyes. A cashmere blanket draped carefully over one shoulder. Even her breakdown looked curated. It's heartbreaking when private family matters get twisted publicly by bitter people who want revenge instead of peace. Some of us are trying to protect our families while others are focused on destruction, praying for healing. Yvonne stared at the screen in disbelief. No accountability, no remorse, just performance. And somehow reading it hurt less than it used to. Because once you saw manipulation clearly, it became harder to confuse it with sincerity. Her phone rang. Olivia? Tell me you haven't responded to anything online, Olivia said immediately. I haven't. Good. Yvonne rubbed her temples. She's turning herself into the victim already. She's panicking. Yvonne looked back at Brianna's story. She doesn't sound panicked. Trust me, Olivia replied calmly. People like Brianna only perform innocence when they feel control slipping. Yvonne leaned back against the couch cushions. I hate this. I know. I don't want strangers discussing my marriage like it's a reality show. Olivia's voice softened slightly. You can't control gossip. You can control your dignity. The sentence settled heavily inside her. Dignity. Not silence, not submission. Dignity. A notification interrupted them again. This time from Ethan. Brianna's threatening everyone in the house. She thinks Quentin's going to blame her for the ethics review. Yvonne closed her eyes briefly. Good. Let them turn on each other. For once, she was tired of being the only one carrying consequences. Olivia spoke again. I need to ask you something carefully. What would you consider releasing a public statement? Yvonne sat upright immediately. What no? Hear me out. I don't want attention. You already have attention, Olivia said gently. The question is whether you let other people control the narrative completely. Yvonne fell silent. Because unfortunately, Olivia was right. Brianna was already painting her as unstable and vindictive. Quentin was probably doing the same privately. And silence, while dignified, could also become emptiness, people filled with lies. I don't want to sound bitter, Yvonne whispered. Then don't. Olivia paused. Speak clearly. Speak once. Then stop. Yvonne stared out the window. Snow continued falling softly across the city. When she was younger, she used to think strength looked loud. Now she wondered if real strength was quieter than that. Controlled? Steady? Unapologetic? What would I even say? She asked. Olivia answered immediately. The truth, without cruelty. An hour later, Yvonne sat at her dining table, staring at a blank notes document. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She deleted 6 opening lines before finally breathing deeply and starting over. Not emotional, not defensive, just honest. When she finished, she read it 3 times, then sent it to Olivia. 5 minutes later, Olivia replied, Post it. Yvonne's pulse hammered while uploading the statement to Instagram. Then she pressed share before fear could stop her. I will not discuss private legal matters publicly, but I also won't allow false narratives to define me. Being hurt does not make someone unstable. Seeking therapy does not make someone weak. And choosing self-respect after betrayal is not revenge. I wish healing for everyone involved, including myself. But I will no longer stay silent simply to make other people comfortable. The second it went live, Yvonne wanted to throw her phone across the room. Her anxiety spiked instantly. Too vulnerable, too exposed, too honest. But then the comments started appearing. Not hateful, supportive. Women sharing stories about manipulation, about being called emotional when reacting normally to pain, about shrinking themselves to protect relationships that never protected them back. Yvonne stared at the screen in shock. One comment hit especially hard. The right people never require you to disappear for their comfort. Tears burned suddenly behind her eyes, because Quentin had spent years teaching her the opposite. Another message appeared, this one from Dr. Marissa Cole. Saw your statement. I'm proud of you. Also, Northlake wants to bring you in for temporary consulting if you're interested. We're dealing with an operations nightmare, and your name came up immediately. Yvonne read the message 3 times. Your name came up immediately. Not Quentin's wife, not the center of a scandal. Her. For her mind, her work, her capability, something inside her chest loosened painfully. God. She missed feeling useful. She missed feeling like a person instead of someone constantly managing another person's emotions. Her phone buzzed again. Quentin this time. She almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity won. What she answered quietly. His voice sounded different immediately, less controlled, more tired. You posted publicly? Yes. You're escalating things. No, Yvonne said calmly. I'm correcting them. Silence. Then Quentin exhaled sharply. You're making this impossible. Yvonne frowned slightly. Impossible. Interesting word, because Quentin never called humiliating her impossible, only defending herself. What exactly did you expect me to do? She asked softly. I expected privacy. There's that word again. You know what I mean? No, Yvonne replied. I think your version of privacy just means nobody else gets to see what you did. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then Quentin lowered his voice. You're changing. Yvonne stared at the snow outside her apartment. Maybe she was. Maybe betrayal had stripped away the version of herself built entirely around endurance. Good, she said quietly. Another silence. Then Quentin spoke again, softer this time. You know, I never wanted to hurt you like this. And for one terrible second, she almost believed him. Because Quentin always sounded most convincing when he mixed truth with cruelty. Maybe he never wanted her pain. He just wanted his comfort more. Yvonne closed her eyes. That doesn't make it better. He didn't answer immediately. Then finally, Vanessa didn't mean anything. There it was. The line cheating men always used when consequences finally arrived. Yvonne almost laughed from exhaustion. She meant enough to replace me at your family table. Quentin inhaled sharply. That wasn't my idea. No, Yvonne said bitterly. You just participated. Silence again. Then his voice changed completely. Colder. Controlled. If you continue damaging my reputation publicly, this divorce becomes much less friendly. There he was, the real Quentin, not regretful, threatened. Yvonne looked around her apartment slowly, at the quiet space, at the career messages waiting unanswered, at the evidence folders, at the woman slowly rebuilding herself beneath all the damage. Then she answered calmly, You already stopped being friendly the night you left my suitcase outside. And this time, when she hung up, her hands didn't shake afterward. That realization frightened her almost as much as it empowered her. Because maybe healing didn't arrive all at once. Maybe it arrived the first time fear stopped making your decisions for you. Then her phone buzzed one final time. Olivia. Heads up. Quentin just contacted his attorneys. Yvonne's stomach tightened. About what 3 dots appeared? Then I think he's finally realizing you're not going back quietly. Yvonne stared at the message while snow covered the city outside. No, she wasn't going back quietly anymore. And maybe that terrified Quentin more than losing her ever did. The flowers arrived Thursday morning. White orchids. Expensive. Elegant. The kind Quentin always bought after fights because he believed beauty could soften accountability. Yvonne stared at the arrangement sitting outside her apartment door while irritation crawled slowly through her chest. No note. Of course not. Quentin preferred ambiguity whenever possible. It allowed him to rewrite intentions later. Maybe the flowers meant apology. Maybe manipulation. Maybe image control. Maybe all three. Her phone buzzed before she could decide whether to throw them away. Olivia. Don't open the door for him alone today. Yvonne froze. He's here. He contacted my office 30 minutes ago, asking for a private conversation. Yvonne looked toward the apartment hallway instinctively. He's outside. Probably soon. Yvonne rubbed her forehead. What does he want now? Olivia sighed. Control. The answer came too quickly to be accidental. Yvonne walked back into the apartment slowly. Over the last week, Quentin's behavior had shifted in waves. First arrogance, then anger, then panic. Now came the phase manipulative, people often saved for emergencies. Softness, the dangerous kind. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Quentin directly. Please let me explain things without lawyers turning everything toxic. Yvonne stared at the message. Without lawyers? Interesting, because Quentin loved structure and contracts when they protected him. He only hated legal oversight once it protected her too. Another message appeared. I'm downstairs. Her pulse jumped immediately. Old instincts surged through her body before logic could catch up. Fix this. Calm him down. Avoid conflict. Yvonne hated how automatic the response still felt. She closed her eyes briefly, then texted Olivia. He's here. Olivia responded instantly. Speakerphone if you talk to him. Record everything legally permitted. And remember, guilt is not the same thing as accountability. Yvonne inhaled slowly, then walked downstairs. Quentin stood near the building entrance, wearing a charcoal wool coat and exhaustion beneath his eyes. For one terrible second, seeing him hurt still affected her. That was the hardest part about loving someone manipulative. The tenderness didn't disappear immediately, just because the truth arrived. Quentin looked up when she approached. His entire face changed. Relief? God. He looked relieved just seeing her, like he still believed proximity gave him influence. You look tired, he said softly. Yvonne folded her arms. So do you. For a moment, neither moved. Then Quentin gestured toward the cafe attached to the building lobby. Can we sit? Yvonne hesitated. Every survival instinct Olivia rebuilt inside her screamed caution. But another part of her needed to hear this, needed to see who Quentin became when charm stopped working automatically. 10 minutes, she said. They sat near the back of the cafe while morning commuters rushed around them. Quentin kept looking at her like he was trying to locate the version of Yvonne he understood best. The quieter version? The easier version? Finally, he spoke. I never wanted things to explode like this. Yvonne almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was such a careful sentence. No direct ownership, no real apology, just regret for consequences. You mean publicly? She said calmly. Quentin's jaw tightened slightly. This whole situation got out of control. No, Yvonne replied softly. It got exposed. Silence. Quentin looked down briefly before speaking again. You think I'm some kind of monster now? Yvonne studied him carefully. Strange. Even now he centered his image instead of her pain. I think you lied to me for a long time. He exhaled sharply. It wasn't that simple. Then explain it simply. The sentence landed harder than she expected. Quentin looked genuinely unsettled, because clarity was difficult for people who survived through emotional fog. He leaned back slowly. Things changed between us. Yvonne stared at him. You froze my credit cards. I panicked. You prepared divorce paperwork before telling me our marriage was over. I was trying to prevent a disaster. You slept with Vanessa. Quentin's face darkened immediately. That relationship, Yvonne repeated quietly. Interesting choice of word. Not mistake. Not confusion. Relationship. He realized it too late. His eyes flickered away. For years, Quentin had been brilliant at controlling conversations, redirecting, softening, minimizing. Today, every sentence seemed to betray him accidentally. Yvonne watched him carefully. You know what's strange? She asked softly. What? I think this is the first honest conversation we've had in years. The comment visibly hit him. Because somewhere beneath Quentin's manipulation lived intelligence. And intelligent people suffered uniquely once their own patterns became visible. I loved you, he said quietly. Past tense again. Yvonne felt the ache immediately despite herself, because she had once loved him enough to build entire futures around his happiness. And yet she whispered, "You still humiliated me." Quentin looked genuinely frustrated now. "You keep reducing everything to one night." "No," Yvonne said calmly. One night just exposed everything else. The cafe noise blurred around them. Espresso machines, conversations, dishes clinking softly. Meanwhile, something old and painful finally cracked fully open between them. Quentin rubbed his hands together slowly. My family made things worse. There it was. The first shift toward blame redistribution. Brianna? Preston? Pressure. Yvonne waited quietly. She pushed too hard, Quentin admitted. And my father kept talking about timing and optics and the executive review. His voice faded slightly, because even Quentin heard how ugly it sounded out loud. Timing, optics, review. Corporate language wrapped around the corpse of a marriage. Yvonne stared at him. You let your promotion matter more than me. Quentin looked away, and that silence was the closest thing to honesty she'd gotten yet. A sharp pain moved through her chest, not because she didn't know, because hearing truth without denial felt devastatingly final. I was overwhelmed, he said eventually. You were strategic. His eyes snapped back toward hers. Yvonne leaned forward slightly. You had timelines, paperwork, financial preparation, emotional narratives ready to go. That's not confusion, Quentin. That's planning. For the first time since sitting down, he genuinely looked cornered. Good. Let him feel it. You think this is easy for me? He asked quietly. Yvonne almost smiled sadly. There it was again. His suffering entering the room before hers fully left it. No, she said softly. I think losing control is hard for you. The sentence hit perfectly. She saw it instantly. The tension in his shoulders, the anger flashing briefly behind his eyes, because Quentin could survive being disliked. What he couldn't survive was losing influence. You've changed, he muttered. Yvonne thought about the motel room, the frozen bank account, the screenshots, the ethics meeting, the woman slowly rebuilding herself piece by piece. Yes, she answered honestly. Something vulnerable crossed Quentin's face then. Real vulnerability this time. Not performance. I miss you. God. That almost broke her. Because part of her still missed him too. Not the current Quentin, the older version, the man who danced with her in the kitchen at midnight, the man who once held her while she cried after Lydia died, the man she kept believing still existed somewhere beneath all the ambition. Yvonne looked down at her coffee cup. I don't know who exactly you miss, she whispered. Me. Or the version of me that made your life easier. Quentin flinched. Actually flinched. Silence stretched painfully between them. Then he spoke again, voice lower. Vanessa meant nothing. There it was. The sentence every cheating man eventually offered like loose change after theft. Yvonne closed her eyes briefly. Then why risk everything for her? She wasn't the point. That answer surprised her enough to look up. Quentin looked exhausted now. Older somehow. The point was, he stopped himself. Yvonne waited. Finally, he finished quietly. The point was feeling like I had control over something. The honesty stunned her. Not because it excused anything, because it revealed something uglier underneath. Quentin wasn't driven only by lust or ego. He was addicted to power. Control at work, control in public, control at home. And whenever life threatened that control, he reached for something or someone to restore it, even if it destroyed people. You should have gone to therapy, Yvonne whispered. A hollow laugh escaped him. My father would rather die. There it was. The Bates family legacy. Not healing. Performance, status, silence. Yvonne suddenly understood something heartbreaking. Quentin had spent his entire life learning that vulnerability made you weak. So instead of processing fear, honestly, he controlled people, including her. But understanding him no longer meant excusing him. That distinction finally felt clear. Quentin leaned closer slightly. We can still fix this. Yvonne stared at him. For one dangerous second, old love reached toward old hope. Then she remembered the suitcase outside the mansion. The frozen account, the ethics panic, the strategic lies, and suddenly the fantasy collapsed. No, she said quietly. Quentin's face went still. Yvonne felt tears burn behind her eyes anyway. Do you know what the saddest part is? She whispered. He said nothing. You taught me to question my own reality for so long that now I don't even trust the good memories anymore. That one hit him. Hard. She saw it immediately. Because some truths bypass defense completely. Quentin looked down at the table, and when he finally spoke again, his voice sounded smaller than she'd ever heard it. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Yvonne swallowed painfully. I know. His eyes lifted slowly toward hers, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Quentin Bates looked genuinely devastated. Not because he got caught, because he finally understood he might actually lose her. But grief arrived too late sometimes, and late grief still couldn't undo deliberate cruelty. Yvonne stood slowly. So, this is it? Quentin asked quietly. She looked at the man she once built her future around, then answered with heartbreaking calm. No, this is just the first time I stopped abandoning myself to keep you comfortable. And before Quentin could speak again, Yvonne walked away. This time, she didn't look back. The divorce filing became official on a rainy Monday morning. No dramatic courtroom scene, no screaming, no cinematic collapse, just signatures, attorneys, quiet voices, and the strange realization that 5 years of marriage could legally dissolve in under an hour. Yvonne sat beside Olivia in a charcoal gray conference room while rain streaked across the windows outside. Across the table, Quentin looked exhausted. Not polished exhausted, destroyed exhausted. The ethics investigation at Halden and Pierce had intensified over the past 2 weeks. Internal audits uncovered questionable vendor allocations tied to Vanessa's consulting channels. Several executive reimbursements were under review. Preston Bates had reportedly hired a crisis management firm, and Vanessa Monroe had quietly resigned. The company hadn't publicly announced details yet, but people were talking. People always talked. Quentin barely looked at Yvonne during the proceedings, maybe because looking at her forced him to confront the damage in human form, or maybe because she no longer looked controllable. Olivia signed the final page calmly and slid it forward. Done. The word landed strangely inside Yvonne. Done. No triumph, no relief explosion, just finality. Quentin finally looked at her then. His eyes lingered on her face for a second too long. You look different, he said quietly. Yvonne almost smiled. Maybe she did, not physically, but emotionally, absolutely. She no longer sat curled inward, trying to anticipate everyone else's comfort before her own. She no longer apologized automatically. She no longer felt responsible for managing Quentin's emotions while ignoring her own wounds. Pain had changed her, but survival had changed her more. Olivia gathered documents efficiently, while Quentin remained seated. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Quentin spoke again. I heard Northlake hired you back. Yvonne blinked slightly. News traveled fast in wealthy Chicago circles. Yes. How's that going? The question sounded almost genuine. That hurt more than cruelty sometimes. Good, she answered softly. Really good. And it was true. Over the past 3 weeks, Yvonne had returned to healthcare operations consulting part-time. The first day walking through Northlake Medical Network again nearly broke her emotionally. Not because she felt weak, because she remembered herself there. Competent, respected, alive. Dr. Marissa Cole had hugged her in the hallway and immediately thrown her into a staffing crisis meeting. By lunchtime, Yvonne was reorganizing intake systems while administrators argued around her. And for the first time in years, her brain felt awake instead of emotionally exhausted. Nobody there cared about Quentin Bates. Nobody cared about country club appearances or executive wives or curated perfection. They cared whether systems worked, whether patients got help, whether chaos became manageable. Yvonne remembered driving home after that first day with tears streaming down her face because she finally understood something horrifying. She had not been weak in her marriage. She had been emotionally starved. Quentin stood slowly now. The room suddenly felt smaller. Rain tapped softly against the windows. "I never thought this would happen," he admitted quietly. Yvonne looked at him carefully. "I think part of you did." That honesty landed heavily between them, because Quentin had spent months preparing for this collapse long before she knew it existed. He just assumed he would control the ending. Quentin looked down briefly. "My father won't speak to me right now." Yvonne said nothing, not because she lacked empathy, because she was tired of being recruited into comforting the man who destroyed her. "He thinks I embarrass the family." The sentence sounded bitter and strangely sad. Yvonne almost pitied him then. Almost. Because Quentin spent his entire life chasing approval from people who only valued performance, success, image, status. The moment he failed publicly, even his own family began pulling away. But that tragedy belonged to Quentin now, not her. "What happens with the company?" she asked quietly. He gave a humorless laugh. "I honestly don't know anymore." For the first time since she met him, Quentin sounded uncertain about the future. No strategy, no polished certainty, just fear, real fear. And somehow that frightened Yvonne too, because she finally understood how much of Quentin's identity depended on control. Without status, he seemed almost untethered. Olivia checked her watch discreetly. "We should go." Yvonne nodded. But before she turned away, Quentin spoke one last time. "Yvonne." She looked back. His eyes were red around the edges now. Exhaustion, regret, maybe grief. "You were right about something." She waited silently. "I should have gone to therapy." The words hit harder than expected, because beneath all the manipulation and cruelty, there was still a human being standing in front of her, broken in ways he never learned to name correctly. Yvonne swallowed slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "You should have. Not cruel, not comforting, just true." Quentin nodded once, like a man finally understanding the cost of emotional avoidance too late to undo it. Then Yvonne walked out beside Olivia into the rainy Chicago afternoon. And this time, the ending didn't feel explosive. It felt quiet, like a storm finally exhausting itself. 3 weeks later, Yvonne stood in front of her apartment mirror, adjusting the sleeves of a dark green blouse before work. The city glowed softly beyond the windows behind her. Her apartment looked different now. Lived in, books stacked beside the couch, fresh groceries in the kitchen, hospital files spread across the dining table. Tiny evidence of a real life rebuilding itself. Not perfect, not glamorous, real. Her phone buzzed. A message from Brianna. Yvonne stared at the screen for several seconds in disbelief. They hadn't spoken since the voicemail. Finally, curiosity won. "I know you probably hate me, but for what it's worth, Quentin's not okay. And neither is my family. I shouldn't have posted that story." Yvonne read the message twice. No excuses this time. No fake spirituality. No passive-aggressive manipulation. Just damage. Ugly damage spreading through everyone involved. For a moment, Yvonne considered not responding at all. Then she typed carefully. "You humiliated me when I was already heartbroken. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either." The typing bubble appeared immediately, then disappeared, then returned. Fair enough. And strangely, that was enough. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just boundaries. Real ones. Yvonne set the phone down and looked at herself in the mirror again. She still carried grief. Some nights she still woke up remembering Quentin's voice. Sometimes songs hurt unexpectedly. Sometimes memories still arrived warm before turning painful. Healing wasn't linear. Olivia kept reminding her of that. But the difference now, Yvonne no longer confused pain with failure. You could grieve deeply and still move forward. The two things could coexist. Her phone rang again. This time, Dr. Marissa Cole. "Tell me you're awake," Marissa said immediately. Yvonne laughed softly. "Barely." "Good, because the emergency department scheduling system crashed again, and apparently nobody but you understands how to fix it." Yvonne smiled despite herself. "I'm on my way." After the call ended, she grabbed her bag and keys. As she headed toward the elevator, her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. Yvonne hesitated before answering. "Hello, silence." Then Quentin's voice. Quiet. Tired. "I just wanted to hear your voice once more." The old version of Yvonne would have collapsed emotionally hearing that, would have searched for hidden hope, for unfinished love. Now she just felt sad, because she finally understood something devastatingly simple. Love without honesty eventually becomes grief. Yvonne leaned lightly against the elevator wall. "I hope you heal someday, Quentin." His breathing caught softly on the other end. Then, "You too." The elevator doors opened downstairs. Morning light spilled through the lobby windows. People moved around her carrying coffee cups and busy schedules and ordinary lives. And for the first time in a very long time, Yvonne realized she was no longer surviving her life. She was finally living it again. 6 months later, Yvonne Bates stood barefoot in her apartment kitchen at 6:12 a.m., flipping blueberry pancakes while snow fell gently beyond the windows. Soft jazz played quietly from a speaker near the coffee machine. The city below still looked half asleep, and for the first time in years, so did her nervous system. Peace no longer felt suspicious. That realization alone almost made her emotional. Her phone buzzed on the counter beside a stack of hospital reports. Not Quentin, not Olivia, not another crisis. Just a calendar reminder. Dinner with mom's friends, Thursday, 7 p.m. Yvonne smiled faintly at the screen. Small things mattered now. Not luxury, not appearances, not who looked impressive standing beside her at charity galas. Small things, safety, honesty. Breathing without anxiety in your own home. The pancakes sizzled softly while morning light stretched across the apartment floors. A second notification appeared. This one from Dr. Marissa Cole. Northlake's board approved your full consulting expansion proposal, officially offering you Director of Operations Strategy if you want it. And yes, I'm emotionally blackmailing you into saying yes. Vaughn laughed out loud. A real laugh. Warm. Unforced. 6 months ago, she cried alone in a motel room, believing her entire life had collapsed. Now hospitals trusted her judgment again. People valued her mind again. More importantly, she valued it again. Yvonne typed back quickly. "Tell the board I'll accept. And tell them the emotional blackmail worked." She hit send just as another message appeared. This one from Olivia. "Saw the promotion announcement this morning. Proud of you. Also, rumor says Quentin officially resigned before the ethics findings finalized. Thought you'd want to know." Yvonne stared at the message quietly. Quentin had disappeared from public corporate circles almost entirely over the past few months. No more polished interviews. No more executive panels. No more carefully curated social media appearances. The ethics investigation never became fully public, but enough leaked internally to damage his reputation permanently. Vanessa moved to Seattle shortly afterward. Preston Bates stopped appearing at charity events, and Brianna quietly deleted almost half her online presence after people uncovered the old Instagram story. Consequences arrived differently for everyone. Some loud, some private. Yvonne set the phone down gently. Strangely, she didn't feel triumphant anymore. Months ago, part of her wanted Quentin ruined, humiliated, destroyed the way she had been destroyed. But healing changed revenge into something quieter. Distance, indifference, freedom. She no longer woke up wondering whether Quentin regretted losing her. She woke up thinking about staffing systems, grocery lists, winter weather, and whether she had enough blueberries for pancakes. Normal life. Beautifully normal life. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Yvonne frowned slightly and walked toward the apartment entrance. When she opened the door, she froze. Eleanor Bates stood quietly in the hallway, holding a small wrapped box. Older somehow. Smaller too. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then Eleanor gave a nervous smile. I know I should have called first. Yvonne stayed still. Every instinct from the old version of herself wanted to become accommodating immediately. But healing had taught her something important. Kindness without boundaries became self-destruction. What do you need? Yvonne asked gently. Eleanor's eyes filled slightly with tears. I wanted to apologize. The honesty stunned her. Not because Eleanor apologized, because she sounded sincere. No performance, no manipulation, just sadness. Yvonne stepped aside slowly. Eleanor entered the apartment cautiously, looking around at the warm kitchen light and music still playing softly nearby. It's beautiful here, she said quietly. Yvonne nodded once. It feels peaceful. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, like the word itself hurt. For years, the Bates family valued perfection over peace. And look where it left all of them. They sat together near the kitchen island while coffee steamed between them. Finally, Eleanor spoke. I failed you? Yvonne stayed silent. Eleanor looked down at her hands. I kept telling myself Quentin was stressed, ambitious, under pressure. Her voice trembled slightly. But really, I just didn't want to admit my son had become cruel. The sentence settled heavily between them. Yvonne looked at the woman carefully. Eleanor truly did look exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like reality had finally forced its way through years of denial. He learned some of it from us, Eleanor whispered, especially Preston. Yvonne said nothing, because she already knew prestige above vulnerability, control above honesty, appearance above healing. The Bates family built emotional prisons and called them success. Eleanor slid the wrapped box gently across the counter. This belonged to Lydia. Yvonne's breath caught instantly. Slowly she unwrapped it. Inside sat an old silver bracelet, her mother's bracelet, the one Lydia wore every Sunday morning while making coffee. Yvonne stared at it in shock. I thought this disappeared. Eleanor nodded tearfully. You left it at the lake house years ago. Lydia asked me to keep it safe before she passed. Yvonne's eyes burned immediately. She said. Eleanor swallowed hard. She said you forget your worth whenever you love someone deeply. That broke her. Completely. Tears slipped down Yvonne's face before she could stop them, because her mother had seen it long before Yvonne did. The way she disappeared into relationships, trying to earn permanence through sacrifice. Eleanor reached carefully across the counter. I should have protected you better. Yvonne wiped at her face slowly. You should have stopped pretending not to see what was happening. Eleanor nodded immediately. You're right. No defense. No excuse. Just truth. And somehow truth healed more than fake kindness ever could. After Eleanor left an hour later, Yvonne stood alone by the apartment window wearing Lydia's bracelet. Snow drifted softly across the city. Down below, traffic lights glowed red and gold against wet streets. Her phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. Yvonne hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then Quentin. His voice sounded distant somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. I heard about your promotion. Yvonne leaned lightly against the window. Yeah, I always knew you were brilliant. The words should have meant something once. Now they just sounded late. You had a strange way of showing it, she answered softly. Silence. Then Quentin laughed quietly to himself. Painfully. Fair. Yvonne closed her eyes briefly. She no longer hated him. That surprised her sometimes. She hated what he did, hated how deeply he wounded her. But hatred itself eventually became too heavy to carry forever. I'm in therapy, Quentin said suddenly. Yvonne blinked. What I started 3 months ago. The confession sounded awkward, unpracticed, human. Good. Is it helping? A long silence followed. Then finally, it's making me realize how much damage I confused with ambition. Yvonne swallowed slowly. Outside, snow continued falling in soft silence. I hope you keep going, she said honestly. Another pause. Then Quentin spoke quietly. I loved you, Yvonne. Tears burned unexpectedly behind her eyes, because somewhere in all the manipulation and fear and control, maybe part of him really did. But damaged love still damaged people, and understanding that had changed her life. I know, she whispered. The line stayed quiet for a second longer. Then Quentin spoke one final time. You were the only person who ever made me feel safe enough to stop performing. Yvonne looked down at Lydia's bracelet around her wrist. Funny. She used to think love meant saving someone. Now she understood something different. Love should not require abandoning yourself to heal another person's wounds. That was never supposed to be my job, she said gently. Quentin inhaled shakily on the other end. I know. And this time, finally, it sounded like he truly did. After the call ended, Yvonne stood quietly in the soft morning light while the city moved below her. No dramatic music, no revenge speech, no perfect ending. Just peace. Real peace. The kind built slowly after surviving people who taught you to question your own worth. Yvonne looked around her apartment one last time, at the career she rebuilt, at the boundaries she learned, at the woman she finally became again. Then she smiled softly to herself. Not because her life had been destroyed, because it hadn't. It had finally become hers. For a long time, Yvonne believed being loved meant being endlessly understanding. She believed patience could heal dishonesty, that sacrifice could earn loyalty, that if she just became softer, calmer, easier to love, the people around her would eventually choose her with the same devotion she gave them. But emotional manipulation has a dangerous way of teaching good people to distrust themselves. Sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with cheating. Sometimes it begins the first time someone convinces you your pain is inconvenient, the first time they call your instincts dramatic, the first time you apologize for reacting normally to being hurt. And slowly, piece by piece, you disappear, trying to keep the relationship alive. Yvonne's story was never really about revenge. It was about awakening, about learning that kindness without boundaries becomes self-abandonment, about realizing love should feel safe, not strategic, about understanding that being chosen means nothing if you constantly have to shrink yourself to remain lovable. The hardest truth she learned was this: some people only recognize your value after losing access to you, but their regret is not your responsibility. Healing begins the moment you stop begging people to treat you with basic dignity and start giving that dignity to yourself instead. And maybe that's the real victory. Not revenge, not humiliation, not watching someone fall apart after hurting you. Real victory is waking up one day and realizing your peace no longer depends on the people who broke your heart. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments. What moment made you realize your self-respect mattered more than saving a relationship? And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after betrayal, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who might need the reminder. Being loving should never require becoming invisible.